So hello everyone, and we welcome you in the discussion of UPSC Mains examination GS paper 3. Now all of us know that GS paper 3 comprises of the following subjects: economics, agriculture, science and technology, environment, disaster management and internal security. In this discussion, I will be taking up questions related to economics. So I will be touching upon almost 6 questions with you. In the discussion of these questions, I would try to give you a generic framework of the answer as well as the approach that one is expected to take in these kind of answers. So let us begin. So here we go. This is economics. Now the first question of the question paper, GS paper 3, UPSC Mains, was explain the difference between computing methodology of India's gross domestic product GDP before the year 2015 and after the year 2015, and you had to answer this in 150 words. Now this is a very I would put it in a very basic question category which every aspirant is expected to know, because we all know the importance of GDP. Hence it is expected that every UPSC aspirant should know how the calculations of GDP are made, and since the reforms are recent, 2015. So one is expected to know up to a certain details about how the things were done before 2015 and how the calculations are done after 2015. So let us see how to approach this question. Now you see, this is the answer. So I'm going to first tell you how to create a mental framework of the answer whenever you see a question related to economics in UPSC. So see, this question says India's GDP before and after 2015. That's the theme of the question. So the answer to this question should have 3 different parts. Number 1, introduction. Number 2, body. And number 3, conclusion. These 3 parts must be there in this answer. In the introduction of this answer, UPSC would expect you to use a few specific and unique terms which would give an idea to the evaluator that you actually know the answer. So what are the terms that they are looking for in this answer? They are looking for terms like gross domestic product in the introduction, right? Gross domestic product, SNA, system of national accounts, then NSO, which comprises of CSO and NSSO, right? So these two were merged to create NSO. Then one would expect you to use the name of Pranab Sen committee, and then you have to also talk about alignment of India's GDP calculation method with global system. These are the things that you have to write in your introduction. When it comes to body of the answer, you are expected to write changes in the data plus changes in the methodology. So there are 2 changes. First, data structure changed. Then there was change in the method of calculation of GDP itself. In fact, the definition itself got changed, right? And then you also have to write something about the interpretation. So things changed, which means interpretation would change. So your interpretation is a very important component of the body of the answer. And then you have to conclude. In the conclusion, you have to write some of the concerns that were raised across the world. There was a huge debate, So what happened is around 2015, so the method of calculation of GDP was changed in India, and there was a huge debate within India and outside India that government of India made these changes because government wanted to prove that our GDP is much higher. So there was a debate in the world that actual GDP of India is here, but government changed the method to prove that our GDP is here. So people were saying that we overestimated the GDP, and this debate was there for a huge period, long period of time. So it was a huge debate for a very long period of time. In fact, even now, people say that India is overestimating its GDP, and in that context, this question has been asked to you. So let us see how to answer this question. You see, this is the introduction part. So how would you write the question? You should write that basic things. So this should be your introduction, by the way. So in the introduction, you can write that GDP shows market value of final goods and services produced within an economy in a given year. And India's GDP is calculated based upon SNA, system of national accounts. Now, up to 2015, we were using the data provided by CSO, But in 2015, the CSO itself made changes in the GDP calculation and the way data collection and data use would be done. All these things were changed. Now, when we changed the system, we made sure that India's system of calculation of GDP or national income is aligned with global systems like IMF and UN. That is what we did. And when we must take the name of this committee, that all these things were changed based on the recommendations of some committees, the most important committee being Pranab Sen committee. All right, so these are the things that we have to write in the introduction. If you feel you can keep this part to be a little shorter, but I would suggest that if you incorporate this part in the answer, that would make the answer a little better. It makes the answer more rich and presentable. Now, when it comes to body of the answer, see, in the body of the answer, you have to come to the actual question and the actual changes that were made in the GDP calculation. So let's have a look at the body of the answer. Following are the major changes in the GDP calculation. So now we have to write the actual content. So what is the first change that happened in calculation of GDP? There was a change in the base year. So, you know, base year is reference year. So, for example, if you want to look at your performance this year, so you must compare your performance with some year in the past. So, for example, if I want to see how you performed in terms of your academics in 2022. So, I need to fix 1 year in the past. So, for example, 2020 or 2019, and I would compare your performance this year with 2019. So, 2019 is the base year. So, what we did is, in India, we changed the base year for GDP calculation every 5 years, right? So keeping in practice, the base year was changed from 2004, 5 to 11, 12. This was the first change which was made. Now, second is the change in data source. This is very, very important. So you see, before 2015, we were taking data related to companies. So, for example, what does GDP do? GDP looks at the performance of all the sectors of the economy: agriculture, industries, and services. Before 2015, to look at the performance of industrial sector, manufacturing sector, we were taking data from ASI, Annual Survey of Industries, and we were also taking some data from RBI. These were the two data sources which we were using to look at the performance of industries. As I said, in GDP calculation, you look at the performance of all the three sectors: agriculture, industry, and services. So for industry, we were looking at this data. Now, after 2015, we started to use a new data series. You know what happened after 2015? The government of India said, no, we will not use ASI. Now, the government of India did something very unique. The government of India said that all the companies, companies of India who register with Ministry of Corporate Affairs, they will get a unique 21-digit identity. All right, an identification number, an ID will be given to any company which registers itself with Ministry of Corporate Affairs. See, when you create a company, you have to register yourself with Ministry of Corporate Affairs. When you register, you will get an ID, 21-digit ID. So hence that is called as MCA 21. So whosoever is a part of MCA 21, the government of India said, we will look at the performance of industries by looking at that list. All right, so that is this change. That's the unique change that happened. The moment you look at the MCA 21 list, so what got included in the GDP calculation now? So for example, financial institutions and regulatory institutions, SEBI and all these things, they also got included, all right, along with MCA 21. Now, local organizations and institutions were also covered under GDP. So see, GDP started to become more rich. As I told you, I'll repeat it, that what is GDP? GDP looks at the performance of different sectors of the economy, for example, agriculture, industry, and services. To look at the performance of industries, we were looking at ASI, and now we are also looking at, we are looking at the performance of industries through MCA 21. Along with that, we have included financial institutions, regulatory bodies, local organizations, and these institutions. So this is how these basic changes have been made. Now, what is the change in the method? You had to write all that, right? That was the basic that you had to write. Now, when it comes to the method and the change in the method, you have to write these things. So see, what is factor cost? factor cost, see, whenever you produce something or manufacture something. So for example, if I'm a manufacturer of mobile phone, what are the factors of production that I'm going to use? I need workers, so I will pay salary and wages to them. I need capital, so if I take a bank loan, I have to give interest. I need an office, a factory, so I have to pay rent on it. So these are called as the factors of production. So whenever you say factor cost, you are adding all the inputs of production, and whatever value you get is called as factor cost. Fine. So factor cost is important for producers. So if I'm a factory owner, for me factor cost is very important. Then there is something called as market price. What is market price? Market price means factor cost plus indirect taxes plus subsidy. I'll give you an example. So for example, suppose that you go to buy a mobile phone in the market. Suppose I am the mobile phone manufacturer. The cost of production of mobile phone, let's say, is 10,000 rupees. Fine. So for example, if you go to market, you will get this mobile phone for, let's say, 11,000 rupees, right? Why? Because I'll add my profit also. In that 10,000 cost of production, 1,000 profit, so 11,000 rupees. But when you go to market, you are a buyer. You don't pay 11,000 rupees actually. You will also have to pay taxes. All right. So suppose tax is 2,000. So 11 plus 2, 13. You will pay 13. Now you won't pay 13 also. If you are paying tax, I also need to see if government is giving you subsidy to buy mobile phone. Suppose government wants everybody in India to have mobile phone and everybody is getting subsidy. So suppose government of India gives you, so let's say 3,000 subsidy. All right. So 11,000 was the cost of mobile phone. You are paying 2,000 taxes, 13. But government gives you 3,000 subsidy. 13 minus 3, 10. So you are paying actually 10,000 rupees. 10,000 rupees becomes the effective market price for you. Fine. So that is the difference between factor cost and market price. So for buyers, consumers, market price is important. For factories who are producing things, factor cost is important. Earlier, before 2015, in India, we were calling GDP calculated at factor cost as our GDP. So whenever you used to read this in the newspaper, no, that GDP of India is this, GDP of India is that, they were actually talking about GDP at factor cost. But from 2015 onwards, they changed it. Now they are saying GDP is actually GDP at market price. So they have changed it. Now they don't call GDP as GDP at factor cost. Now they call GDP as GDP at market price. All right. Now before 2015, look at this very carefully because UPSC expected you to write this in the exam. That before 2015, see, I'll show you. So before 2015 or up to 2015 in India, GDP was GDP at factor cost. This was the main GDP in India. Fine. But we were also calculating GDP at market price at that time as a side calculation. We were also calculating it because GDP at market price was showing GDP from the side of the buyers, consumers. So GDP at market price. What was GDP at market price? We used to bring it here. And then we used to add indirect taxes and subsidies. It used to give us GDP at market price. But this was not called as the main GDP. This was called as the headline or main GDP of India. This was just a byproduct which we were also calculating. All right. And how were we calculating GDP MP? We were calculating it based on this only. All right. So this was the case. Now, the government of India made a big change. I'll first show you the change here itself. First of all, the government said this is not going to be my GDP now. So the government after 2015 said that GDP will be equal to GDP market price. Now when you make GDP as GDP market price, the government of India then said that in the calculation of GDP market price, we will use other formulas. We are not going to use this factor cost only, because if the government would have used factor cost, why would they change? Why would they change GDP from GDP factor cost to market price? So if the government is saying now my GDP is this, the government also introduced new methods to calculate GDP market price. So what is the new method? Let's have a look. What is the calculation change? So as I told you, this is old. Factor cost is this, market price is this. I already showed you. Now there is a new thing which the government introduced. It is called as basic prices. BP, basic prices. What is a basic price? So see, basic price is equal to factor cost plus production tax minus production subsidy. All right. So basic prices is equal to production tax minus production subsidy. Now, what is a production tax and what is a production subsidy? So I'll give you an example. So let's go back and let's see what a production tax and subsidy is. See, I've got this diagram for you. It will make the things clear. So for example, this is a company. This is a firm which manufactures mobile phones. Now, in this firm, when you are trying to set up a company to manufacture mobile phones, what is your output? Mobile phones. Now, how many mobile phones you are manufacturing depends how many you want to produce. When you open this factory and when you are doing your paperwork, registration work, would you pay registration charges and taxes? Would you pay stamp duty when you are creating the factory? Yes. Does the stamp duty and registration charges, do they depend upon the number of mobile phones you are manufacturing? No. They are fixed in nature. So if I'll have a factory, I have to pay stamp duty and registration charges. It doesn't matter whether I manufacture 1 mobile phone or 20 mobile phone or 1 lakh mobile phone. Doesn't matter. Which means there are some taxes and subsidies which do not depend upon the amount of production or output or the number of units of your product that you are creating. It doesn't depend on that. So these stamp duty and registration charges and taxes, they don't depend upon the number of mobile phones you manufacture. So these are called as production tax and production subsidy. Now, on the other hand, there are some taxes and subsidies which depend upon the number of units that you are taking into consideration. So for example, look at this, custom duties, excise duties. If I import 1 pen from outside India, I will pay custom duties on 1 pen. If I import 2 pens, I'll pay custom duties on 2 pens. So custom duties that I pay depends upon the number of units. These kind of taxes and subsidies which depend upon the number of units of an item are called product tax and product subsidy. These two are different. Fine. So in the calculation of basic prices, we take factor cost and production tax and production subsidy. And I told you what are production tax and subsidy, which don't depend upon the volume of production. Now, what is market price? According to the new formula, we are calculating market price. So earlier we were calculating market price from factor cost. Now we are calculating market price is equal to basic price plus product tax minus product subsidy. Look at this now, which means now you are also talking about both production tax and product tax. So production tax depends, doesn't depend upon the volume of production or your output. But product tax, I told you, depends upon the units produced. So if you produce one pen, you pay tax on 1 pen. If you produce 5 pens, you pay tax on 5 pens, right? So now your market price is equal to basic prices plus product tax, which depends upon the number of units, and product subsidies. And I also told you that these basic prices consist of factor cost and this. So basic prices already have these. So don't you think that our market price has everything inside it now? Our market price has production tax, production subsidy, as well as product tax and product subsidy. It consists of everything now. This is the change. So the examiner is looking for these kind of explanations from you. This is the interpretation. Now, then what we do? Then we use a concept called as value added. Let me explain to you what is value added. So guys, for example, I have this water bottle and I bought this water bottle for 10 rupees. So what I do is, my input is this water bottle, its price is 10 rupees. Now when I buy this, I take out water from it and I convert this water into some kind of energy drink, right? So you must have consumed energy drink. So let's say I convert this normal water into energy drink, and that energy drink is my output. The price of my energy drink is 100 rupees a bottle. I change it. So I take water out and I put it in a new bottle and I call it energy drink by putting color, by putting different ingredients inside it, and it becomes energy drink. So its price is 100. So what is value added? Value added is 90 rupees, right? Value added actually shows what is that new thing that has been done in the production process. So I took a normal water and I changed it to energy drink. So what have I added in it? So that addition is worth 90 rupees. So if you add all the value additions by different industries, if you put everything together, like I have a factory, I have done value addition, somebody else has a factory, they do value addition. So if you take value additions of all the factories, it will give you a good idea about what has happened in the industrial sector, right? Or in fact, that will also give you a very good idea about what has happened in service sector, agriculture, wherever you go. You just need to find what is the value addition you have to done. So if you add the value addition of the entire economy, it will give you a good idea of what has been created as new thing in the economy in that year, right? So as I was telling you that after you write this formula, then you have to write a new concept, right, which is gross value added at basic price. And I gave you the idea. What is value added? I already told you. This is how you calculate value added. So what is gross value added at basic price? So you can calculate gross value added at basic price using gross value added at factor cost, and the value added formula is same which I taught you. Gross value added at factor cost plus production tax minus production subsidy. And I told you what is production tax and what is production subsidy. It doesn't depend upon the volume of output. Now, after you have done this, you know the formula. Now you have to calculate gross value added at basic price for all the sectors of the economy. So go everywhere, all the industries, everywhere, and calculate gross value added at basic price. Whosoever is creating value, whatever they are manufacturing, producing, giving, goods, service, anything, just calculate the gross value added at basic prices. And what are basic prices? These are basic prices. So calculate gross value added at basic price, then add all the gross value at basic price for the economy. So suppose I have a factory, calculate gross value added at basic price for me. Then go to somebody else, add everything. So this is your addition. Then add product tax to it and then subtract product subsidy. So take gross value added at basic price of the entire economy, add product tax, subtract product subsidy, and whatever you get will be called as GDP MP. Gross domestic product at market price. And this GDP MP government is calling now as GDP. So the GDP that you see in the newspaper these days, it's this GDP. And you have to write this. A question can be asked like, why is this basic price important? So basic price makes sense for the producers. That is why we are doing things at the level of basic price. All right. Now, if you see carefully, I'm going to tell you now what are the concerns related to. So see, now I'm going to tell you what are the concerns or debate related to GDP. You have to write it in the conclusion. As a passing reference, you should write it. This will fetch you good marks. Now I'll show you where all people are criticizing the government. People are saying that in that list of MCA 21, which I told you, so in that list of MCA 21, there are many industries which are non-operational. So for example, I'm explaining economics to you. Now tomorrow I decide to open up a factory and register it with the government of India. I'll go and register and I'll say, Mr. Government, I have started a new office and a factory. This is the name of the company, etc., etc. But I don't do anything there. How do I use it? Now I start to use my factory to convert my black money into white. They are called shell companies. So there are many, companies which are doing nothing, shell companies, etc., etc. They have also registered themselves with MCA. MCA 21, they are present in that list. So if you add all those things, then your gross value added figures go up, right? Because you are adding all those companies also which are not doing anything. They are shell companies only. They are doing things but not in a proper way. They are converting my black money into white. So all those become a part of this gross value added because you are calculating gross value added for every industry in that MCA 21. So that means your GDP figure will be inflated. The real GDP will be 4%, but this formula will give you 7%. That is the debate. Next is, look at this GDP. In this GDP, you have something new called product tax and product subsidy, right? So when you put this product tax and product subsidy, now people are telling the government of India that if the government of India increases the tax, product tax, our GDP will increase. And then people are also saying that if the government of India reduces subsidy, and is the government trying to reduce subsidy these days? Yes, people are saying that if government reduces subsidy, increases tax, automatically our GDP will go up, which means it can be manipulated. So these are some of the things people are saying. In fact, what happened is when this new formula was adopted and this new method was used to calculate our GDP in the year 2013, our GDP by old formula was 4.5%, but using the new formula it became 5.1%, and people started to criticize the government of India, saying you are using this new formula because you want to manipulate GDP. I already told you about this, that there are many industries and factories which are a part of MCA 21. They are shell companies, they are not doing anything, but since they have also been included in GDP, the contribution of manufacturing in our GDP looks very high. So the contribution of manufacturing was 15% only when this new formula came, but this new formula said that no, contribution of manufacturing is 18, so it is inflating the contribution of manufacturing. And this I already told you, overestimation shell companies, MCA 21, and then this one also I told you that there is a scope to manipulate this GDP because these two can be manipulated. Alright, so this is how, guys, you had to write this answer. If you would have written this answer like it, you will get good marks. Alright, so let's go to the next question. Next question is not very difficult. It says, distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget. Explain the components of both these budgets, right? So this, for this question, I would call this question as a basic question only. This requires you to write a lot of points in the answer because practically you have to write everything about the budget. But how would you make a start of this answer, right? That's very important. So let's see. So what is this answer? This was question number 2 of the paper. So there were 2 parts of the answer. First, you have to write what is capital budget versus what is revenue budget, and second, you have to explain the components. So you see, you can start your answer by saying that, you know, in the constitution there is a provision for annual financial statement, article 112, that is popularly called as budget. Budget has 2 parts, revenue budget and capital budget. So what is the meaning of revenue budget? So revenue budget is concerned with things which are recurring in nature. So for example, there are things which the government has to repeatedly do, pay wages, salary to the staff, etc., etc. And then there are things which the government does not have to repeatedly do. So those things which the government does not need to repeatedly do, they are capital in nature. So for example, if the government wants to buy an asset, a machine, if the government wants to buy a building, so the government doesn't do it every day or after regular intervals. No, it depends. If the government wants to buy, they will buy it, right? But there are few things which the government will definitely do, right, on a regular basis. So these things are revenue, and these things which are not related to regular things of the government, they are related to some assets. They are called as capital budget. Now, revenue budget can be, you know, divided into 2 parts. So revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. See, budget, whenever you use the word budget, budget will always involve 2 things: sources of income and the avenues of expenditure, which means from what sources you are earning money and where you are putting that money. So from wherever you are earning your money, that is called revenue, and wherever you are, that is called as receipts, and wherever you are putting your money, that's called as expenditure. Every budget in this world will always have these 2 terms, receipts and expenditure. So revenue budget has revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. Capital budget has capital receipts and capital expenditure. So in revenue receipts, you have 2 kinds of revenue. So the government earns money through 2 ways. One is through taxes, one is through non-taxes. So through taxes, you have direct and indirect tax. You already know it. And then here in the capital budget, capital receipts, there are 2 types of capital receipts. One is debt creating, one is not debt creating. And second is capital expenditure. So let us look at these things in detail. So in the revenue receipts, you had to write all this. You see, this is your revenue receipts. Fine, you have to explain these 2. So here you have to write So the sources of revenue of Government of India related to taxes, direct tax, indirect tax, you have to give some examples. And then non-tax revenue, interest, fee, fine, profit, gift, all these things, right? Now, revenue expenditure. So that is revenue receipt, which means sources of earning. Now, sources of expenditure. So these are the revenue expenditure that you have to, for example, consumption of goods and services by government, expenditure on social service, defense, grants to state government, payment of interest on loan, expenditure on subsidies, pension, salary. I told you, these are the regular things which the government has to do. These are the things which government does regularly, recurring. So this is your expenditure. Then you have to write capital receipts. So loans, borrowings, aids received by the government, then receipts from small saving, recovery of loan and disinvestment. You remember I told you there are two types of capital receipts, debt creating, non-debt creating. So if the Government of India takes a loan from somebody, like loans, the Government of India can take loans from multiple sources. Whenever you take a loan, you have to return it, which is debt creating. Debt means burden, which you have to repay. But if the Government of India sells its companies, like Air India has been sold and privatized, or if the Government of India goes for disinvestment, Government of India gives away a part of its company to somebody else, or Government of India completely gives its company to somebody, like Air India has been given to Tata Group. So the Government of India received some cash. That cash is capital receipt, which is non-debt creating, because government does not have to return it. Alright, so the money that you get through disinvestment, you don't have to return it. Now, capital expenditure, asset acquisition. So Government of India also buys land, machine, buildings, etc. Defense equipments like currently S-400 and all those things, right? So investment in shares, loans and advances. So the Government of India gives loans to state governments. All these things are capital expenditure. These are the things that you have to write in this question.
The next question was question 3 in GS paper 3, and it was also 10-mark question. It is also a 10-mark question. How did land reforms in some parts of country help to improve socio-economic conditions of marginal and small farmers? Take it. Keyword 1 is this: small and marginal farmer, socio-economic, land reforms. Okay. So the question is saying, how did land reforms that were carried out in India have helped in improving the socio-economic conditions of small and marginal farmers? Now suppose I want to start the question. What I will do is, I may say that according to agriculture census, 86.2% of the farmers in the country, they are small and marginal, and the development of the country depends to a large extent on the development of these set of farmers, or for inclusive development, the development of these farmers are important. Then the question says that how did land reforms in some parts of the country help to improve socio-economic condition. Now the question is, the examiner is assuming here that land reforms has helped in improving the conditions of farmers, but only in some parts of the country. So you know about land reforms. We know that land reforms were successful only in few parts of India, especially they were successful in the areas of West Bengal to some extent, where we had this Operation Barga, and in Kerala as well, where in Kerala mein, the Land Reforms Act amendment in 1969 was considered bit successful. So first, you can start the question by saying that these many farmers are there in India who belong to the category of small and marginal farmers, and for any development or inclusive development of the country, the growth of these farmers is essential. Then you can also introduce the topic by saying the land reforms were carried out in the country and the land reforms had certain objectives. And then you can, let's say, draw a schematic where you can draw a schematic that objectives of the land reforms. In a box you can say zamindari abolition or tenancy reforms. Tenancy reforms mein we had security of tenureship, then rationalization of rent, or the ownership rights given to the tenants. Idea was land ceiling, cooperative. These four were the objectives of land reforms. So you can start the answer also by saying that land reforms were initiated in the country with certain objectives, and then in a schematic you can show that these were the objectives of land reforms: zamindari abolition, tenancy reforms, land ceiling, and the cooperative. Then you can also say that land reforms, after this, land reforms were not successful in many states because of the obstruction that was created by zamindars, because of the loopholes that were created. Like, for example, in certain states a term was used, efficiently managed farms. If you are having a large amount of land which is coming under ceiling, but the government gives you, or you suppose you have a large farm and you are saying I'm efficiently managing the farm, then the loophole was created where your land will not be taken. So in most parts of the country the land reforms were not very successful, but in certain areas like in the state of Kerala or in the state of the West Bengal, there were some success with the land reforms. Okay? Then you will write improve socio-economic conditions. So how can land improve social conditions? How can land improve economic conditions? See, land not only has economic value in India, but land also has a lot of social importance. If you look at the most powerful section in the society in the rural areas, this is the landed class. If you have a land, land gives you a sense of empowerment. Like, for example, after the tenancy reforms, when lot of land was given to the dominant community, which we call as, or which is known as the dominant class, then in that case it led to the OBC revolution in the Indian political system. So it empowered a lot of people. Economic benefits, because earlier when there was rent that was to be paid, rent was not rationalized. After the land reforms, in most of the states, land rent was reduced to 1/3 to 1/4 of the total produce depending upon the fertility of the land. So how will your economic condition improve? First, it will improve when you will pay less of rent. Second, after some time, you may pay some amount and you may become the owner of the land. Then you are cultivating for yourself. Okay, so land was given to landless agriculture workers and the rent was also rationalized. Okay, ownership rights were conferred, rent was rationalized, and security of tenureship was given. See, earlier you could be evacuated from the land at the whims and fancies of the landowners. But abhi kya hua? A security was given to you. And when you were given a security, you could invest in the land, and if you invest in the land fertility will increase and your production is going to go up and your economic condition is going to improve. So, social, that is land is a means of empowerment. You can give the example of the dominant class as defined by M.N. Srinivas, or the OBC revolution in the Indian political system, and then the economic benefits. So, land reforms in some parts of the country help to improve socio-economic conditions of the small and marginal farmers. Then towards the end, you can write 1 or 2 lines in conclusion, because again it was just a 10 marker question for 120-150 words. Question 4, which said how and to what extent would micro irrigation help in solving India's water crisis? Again, in this question, if I am to look at the keywords, the keyword is micro irrigation, water crisis, and how and to what extent. It is assumed by the examiner that there is water crisis in the country. The examiner is assuming that there is water crisis in the country, and he is asking you that micro irrigation can help in solving this water crisis, but you have to tell him up to what extent and how will it solve the problem of water crisis in the country. Okay? So when you will start this question, by telling the examiner that you also know about the water crisis in India. You can start the question by saying that WHO recommends 1700 meter cube of water per capita for a healthy lifestyle. Per capita availability of water in India is 1486 meter cube per person in India in 2021. And we are already facing problems of water stress, moving towards water scarcity. Okay? So you will start this by telling the examiner that yes, there is a water crisis in India and we also are aware about it. You can give examples of drinking water crisis that we had in Chennai or drinking water crisis that we had in Bangalore last year. So you can start the question by this, by telling the examiner that there is a water crisis in the country. Okay. Now this was a question of 10 marks, that is 120-150 words are to be written here. Now once you have given a brief introduction of 3-4 lines, then you will start the question that how and to what extent would micro irrigation can help in solving the water crisis. What is the root of the water crisis in India? Or where do we use maximum of India's fresh water? So 78% of fresh water is used in the field of agriculture. 89% of the groundwater is used in agriculture. And when you look at the irrigation systems in India, most of the irrigation systems, they are less efficient. Like for example, canal irrigation, it will offer efficiency of as low as 38%. So when you look at the efficiency, it is low. There is low water use efficiency. You are wasting a lot of water. When I look at the micro irrigation systems offer efficiency as much as 85 to 90% in case of drip irrigation. So drip irrigation can offer a very high efficiency. Even the sprinkler irrigation can offer a very high efficiency. So if you have a water or if you have an irrigation system wherein the water use efficiency is very high, then water wastage can be prevented. And this water which is otherwise wasted can then be utilized. If suppose I am having a good system of irrigation like drip and sprinkler, instead of 78%, it can be brought down to 50%. Then some additional amount of water that is available with you, you can use it to solve the water crisis. Okay, so Once you will give the introduction, then you will tell the examiner that maximum of the water is used in case of agriculture, and especially certain water intensive crops which when cultivated in the dry areas of India, they consume maximum of the water, like rice and sugarcane. And now ICAR says that even rice and sugarcane can be cultivated using the drip irrigation. They were always cultivated with the help of sprinkler. Now with the help of drip irrigation also, you can cultivate rice and sugarcane. So you will save a lot of water which otherwise was being wasted. So this way you can solve the problem of water crisis. Okay? So first a small introduction, then you will write about how and to what extent will micro irrigation system solve, and then towards the conclusion you can mention about that the government is promoting the micro irrigation through National Mission on Micro Irrigation, which is now part of Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, where subsidy is given. Okay, is tarah se you can conclude the question.
The next question is, how is the S-400 air defense system technically superior to any other system presently available in the world? Now this question for 150 words here, S-400. So this is, we have to analyze, one is the strategic aspect for India and also acting as a deterrent for other adversaries from India. So we know that this is a surface to air interceptor missile that India has made a deal with Russia. Now let's see. So this is S-400 missile defense system that Russia deployed at the air base in Syria. So this is the S-400 missile defense system. So we can see the batteries of S-400 and the entire unit. Entire unit means it has the long range, the radar here, which is going to intercept. It is the range of around 600 kilometers for this particular radar here to intercept any fighter air jet or any other object, missile that is coming in this range here. So first of all, that India signed this deal with Russia to acquire S-400 air defense missile system, despite the possibility such a move could trigger US sanctions. So we know that US came out with the domestic laws in terms of, so that is not a UN law, to counter America's adversaries through its own Securities Act. So for that, it prohibits to make deal with the adversaries of America. So that was one of the bottlenecks in India, for India to make such a deal with Russia. Even then India, considering the strategic importance with the adversary, the China and also the Pakistan, that China has, we already know that China has already acquired from Russia S-400 Triumph air defense missile, surface to air missile defense system. So it became pertinent for India also to acquire this from Russia. So based on the S-400, one of the most sophisticated surface to air defense that will be used only by Indian Air Force. So it is, we obtained for the $5 billion deal here. Now it can shoot down 80 targets simultaneously, aiming 2 missiles. India's neighbor China also has this same system. So this is the S-400 system. Now let's see how it will work. So it has a long range surveillance radar. So long range surveillance radar means a range of around 600 kilometers here. Then it triggers the command vehicle. And command vehicle now will, so long range surveillance radar tracks objects and relays information. Command vehicle, which to command vehicle, then target is identified and command vehicle orders missile launch. It will order the missile launch. Then to guide that particular missile launched is the role of engagement radar. So this is the engagement radar which will guide this particular missile. Now what particularly it is doing, it is able to engage multiple targets simultaneously. It can happen. For example, this could be fighter jet or some drone, a ballistic missile fired towards India. So these multiple targets at a range of 40 kilometer, then 120 kilometer, 250 kilometer, 400 kilometer. So at different altitude, this particular surface to air missile system can engage and intercept and destroy those targets, protecting the India's sovereignty and integrity. Now, at the same time, we have to compare this with so the question is about that how it is superior to the others. Now, what are the other alternatives that India had? Let's see. Now, other alternative India has, that as US was trying to also woo India to have the terminal high altitude area defense, the THAAD here. Now, the THAAD is also an anti-missile system, but it is restricted to only the missiles here. It cannot intercept fighter jets. So, it cannot intercept and destroy fighter jets. So, the capability of S-400 system to engage multiple targets simultaneously, and that also it is able to sense at which particular missile should be launched, interceptor missile to destroy the target. So, that is far superior compared to the THAAD of USA, as it cannot hit. So, it is mainly anti-ballistic missile interceptor system that US was trying to win India. Then, but it has this hit to kill technology where kinetic energy destroys the incoming warhead and has a range of 200 km, reach an altitude of 150 km. US has already previously deployed in Guam, Hawaii as a measure against. Now, this is the functioning of THAAD system, enemy missile launcher, then missile launcher for interceptor missile. So, enemy launches a missile, THAAD radar system detects the launch, THAAD command and control instructs the launch interceptor missile. Now, the next important alternative that India has, and that was the Patriot advanced capability. That was also could be one alternative for India compared to the S-400. But let's see now features of this Patriot here and compare to the S-400. So, when you compare the S-400 here, first of all, although this is able to engage multiple targets, intercept and destroy, but when we compare the multiple targets that it is engaging, so we can see here the Patriot is an advanced surface to air missile system just like S-400, but it is more biased towards the missiles rather than the fighter jets, because based on the speed, if you look into, so Patriot missiles which are being launched here, so it is more concentrated towards intercepting the ballistic missiles of the enemy, because the speed that is around 1.5 kilometer per hour, whereas in case of S-400 it can go up to 4.8 kilometer per hour. Now, at the speed is greater here for the S-400, so it can intercept quickly even a fighter jet also compared to the capability of the Patriot here, advanced capability. Then another point is the cost here. The cost per battery is almost double in case of the Patriot compared to the S-400. So, considering these various other alternatives, that is the Patriot, the THAAD, so that was a wise decision taken by India, that India made the deal with Russia for the S-400 air defense missile system, which will be used by the Air Force. So, we can see here the radar. Then another one is range also. The range is more wider for S-400 radar compared to the radar range of the Patriot advanced capability. So, there we can see, there we discuss 400 to 600 here, and here it is around 180 kilometers in case of the Patriot. So beyond visual range, it can go to the extent of 600 in case of the S400 here, but here it is to the extent of the 100 kilometers, the radar range here. So this also makes S400 superior to the Patriot advanced capability. So this is the missile launcher, which is intercepting the enemy missile. Missile can be ready to fire in less than 9 seconds. Launchers can hold up to 16 missiles. Can fire missiles automatically or be operated manually. System continues to guide missiles to target and can alter timing of detonation. And scan sky to detect the pinpoint incoming threat which relates to. And it uses microwave signals here. So these are the capabilities of the Patriot advanced capability compared to the THAAD and S400. So that is why we can say based on this question that as it 150 words. So even if the sanctions in terms of the US trying to prevent India from making a deal, India made the deal and that was a wide decision as we discussed in terms of the S400. So it is technically superior to any other system presently. So it is not only about S400 that we have to write, we have to make a comparative aspect, the THAAD and the Patriot advanced capability.
Hello students. Now we are here to discuss the mains questions of paper 3 of Environment and Disaster Management section. If I go through the list of the questions, this year there were 6 of them. Now that has been the highest number of questions UPSC has asked related to disaster management and environment in paper 3, I mean amongst the highest in any of the years. And when I look at the nature of the questions was pretty manageable if you have had good thorough understanding of your current affairs, because all the questions were from the current affairs. There were 2 questions which were related to the COP26, which was recently held at Glasgow. Now that's something which is quite unprecedented because we don't find UPSC to be asking question on the same topic across 2 questions in the same paper. But nonetheless, we have to be prepared as far as UPSC is, we have to be prepared for the surprise events in the examination. So we had 2 questions from COP26 this year. There was a question on landslides in paper 3 and there was another question on landslides in paper 1. And in 2019, there has been a question on landslides as well. And that means that the disasters which are happening very frequently in our country, since landslide is one of them, UPSC will not shy away asking questions repeatedly on the topic. Similarly, other disasters like urban floods, like flooding, like droughts, which happen very frequently in our country, you should be prepared for that. Basically, we have to focus upon the takeaways from the present examination. And the takeaway is that the disasters which are very frequent in our country, the examiner will not shy away from asking questions even if they become frequent and even if they become repetitive in nature across years in the examination paper. The very first question was question 6 in paper 3. Explain the purpose of the Green Grid initiative launched at the World Leaders Summit of COP26 of the United Nations Climate Change Conference. When was this idea first floated in the International Solar Alliance? Now, as far as this question is concerned, this was a very, very important development from the India's point of view. Important development because for the first time, it was Indian PM, Prime Minister Modi, who had mooted this idea of one interconnected solar grid across all the countries, that was transnational interconnected solar grid across all the countries back in 2018 at the very first assembly of International Solar Alliance. So this idea, this launch of Green Grid initiative, which happened very recently, this was the brainchild of International Solar Alliance. But the first time the idea was proposed by somebody was by our country, by Indian PM back in the year 2018. So whether it is International Solar Alliance, it is initiatives like Green Grid Initiative, there are other initiatives like CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or IRIS, which I'll talk about in a little while, because there is another question on COP26 this year. These are the initiatives where India has played a pivotal role. You know, India is one of the founding members of ISA as well. So India has played a pivotal role. And therefore, now these kind of questions become very, very important, not just for the mains examination, but also for the prelims examination. That's the major takeaway from this. Now, the suggested answer could be on the lines of that you open your answer by mentioning that India and United Kingdom jointly launched the Green Grid initiative. Now, this was UK's plan that there should be one sun, one world, there should be one grid for the entire world. So, you can open your answer by giving this kind of introduction. And then you define what ISA is. So, you define that ISA is envisaged as a system of transnational interconnected grid which will offer very critical solutions for clean and green future of the world. So, if Paris Agreement says that 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise is to be achieved by the end of the century, in order to achieve that target, we know that the transition has to be made towards a green future, towards clean future. So, ISA's proposal of a green grid initiative can transform the entire world electrical system. It can transform that. The world electricity system can be completely transformed, and it will be now positioned towards achieving the Paris Agreement and even ISA's goal of having ramping up of solar power across the world. So, you open up your answer like that, and then in the subsequent para you mention that it was the brainchild of ISA and the idea was first introduced by India during ISA's first assembly. That's what the second part of the question is. So, second part of the question can be answered here itself because that's an important part. And then you mention the main purpose. So, the main purpose is the development, the deployment of the interconnected electricity grids across continents, across countries, across communities. Basically, the objective of Green Grid initiative is also to provide last mile connectivity of the solar energy. So that if there is surplus energy with some nation and there is deficit energy with some other nation, then wherever there is surplus energy, that could be routed to the areas of regions of deficit energy such that the supply demand mismatch can be adequately fulfilled. So, this is the main thrust, and then your entire answer revolves around that it will galvanize the global cooperation. That's another important point. ISA wants that different countries should collaborate better, should cooperate better vis-a-vis the solar energy capacity addition. So, it will galvanize the international cooperation amongst the countries. And then right now there is variability in the renewable energy production. That variability can be addressed very well with the help of Green Grid initiative. And like I was just mentioning to you that it will help in boosting the demand supply match. And the accessibility of solar energy, like it is often said that energy is a prerequisite to development. So, the accessibility of solar energy to the poorest will eventually improve as this GGI comes into place. So, GGI in other words is a step towards achieving the Paris target of the world being within 1.5 degree Celsius. That was the first question, direct one, but a good question nonetheless. UPSC asking this kind of question reveals that whatever initiatives India is right now undertaking at the global level, those become very significant from the examination's point of view. The second question again is about a recent development of World Health Organization, and WHO in September last year had revised the guidelines for air quality. It was in this context that the question was asked by UPSC, and again UPSC last year itself 2020 had asked a question on National Clean Air Program, and UPSC this year again asks a question on National Clean Air Program in this question. So, question 7 is describe the key points of revised global air quality guidelines recently released by WHO. How are these different from the last update in 2005? Now this system, though you need not write that, but just know that the system of air quality guidelines was initiated by WHO back in 1987. The first revision was made in 1997, the second revision subsequently in 2005, and the third revision has been made now. And now UPSC then goes on to ask you that what changes in India's NCAP are required to achieve these revised standards. So last year the question on NCAP was wherein you had to discuss the major points, the major key areas of emphasis under National Clean Air Program. And this year the question is, you have to discuss how NCAP will have to be modified in sync with the revised standards as per the WHO air quality guidelines. So I often say that UPSC has this knack of interconnecting two topics. And it did the same under this. It asked you NCAP last year. Mostly the students, now why I am emphasizing upon this is because many a time I get a very innocent yet pertinent question from the students, and the question is ki ma'am, does UPSC repeat questions? Now this means that UPSC doesn't just repeat questions, but UPSC can repeat questions in the very next year itself. So anybody who had thought ki yaar NCAP to was asked last year, this year is a less chance, no, it doesn't work that way with UPSC. Now these, in September 2021, WHO had revised the global air quality guidelines after 15 years. That can be the opening statement and the key points. The key points, bache, if you had been reading your newspapers thoroughly, you wouldn't be missing that. The key point is that these guidelines are for 6 major pollutants. That's the first one. 2 types of particulate matter are covered over here, 2.5, 10, both are covered. Then pollutant gases like carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide and ozone. These are the key pollutants which are covered as per the air quality guidelines by WHO. That's the first point. The second major point, which again most of the newspapers were emphasizing, rather all of the newspapers were emphasizing, is that for the pollutants PM 2.5 and PM 10, the air quality standards have been lowered. That is, the safe values which WHO considered earlier to be the safe values are no more valid, and now the safer limits have come down. Like for PM 2.5, let me just quickly give you the example. The annual limit of the safe value earlier was 10 micrograms per meter cube, which has been revised downwards to 5. Similarly, for PM 20, the safe value earlier was PM 10, particulate matter 10. The safe value earlier was 20 micrograms per meter cube, which now has been revised downwards to 15. So if you go through the table, the safe value, the safe limits for the pollutants have been revised downwards, or they have been kept the same. For most of them, they have been revised downwards, like for ozone, it is kept the same. But the only exception over here, if you pay attention, is for sulfur dioxide. For sulfur dioxide, the value has been revised upwards. So I don't know how many of you actually paid attention to that earlier in 2005, it was considered to be 20. But right now it is considered to be 40 micrograms per meter cube as the safe limit. So with the exception of SO2, for all the other pollutants, it has been revised downwards, and that was the key point which you had to mention, that for most of the pollutants it has been revised downwards, and then you can quote examples of PM 2.5, PM 10. At the same time, make a brief mention of the safe limit for sulfur dioxide which has been revised upwards. Now, what does this mean? What does this imply? WHO revising the safe limits downwards, this implies that what earlier was considered to be safe for the health is presently unsafe. And now this brings us to the second part of the question, what changes are needed in India's NCAP? Now, India's National Clean Air Program which has the target of 20 to 30% of reduction in the pollutants PM 2.5 and PM 10 by year 2024 is envisaged keeping in view the earlier set safe limits by WHO. Because the program initiated in 2019 and therefore the objectives of NCAP were set keeping into view the earlier set safe limits by WHO. But now the safe limits of the pollutants by WHO have been revised downwards, which means that the target setting for NCAP needs to be redone. So that's one of the points, that what changes are required, that first of all the target setting needs to be redone, because the present target of NCAP are not within the safe concentration limit as given by WHO very recently. And then NCAP just focuses upon two types of pollutants, PM 2.5 and PM 10. But rather the WHO says that if we focus upon the 6 pollutants, which I just elaborated are part of the guidelines, if we focus upon these 6 pollutants, then most of the air pollutants can also be taken care of, which means that the scope of NCAP needs to be expanded with respect to the pollutants. That had to be mentioned in the answer as well. And the next point is that right now the coverage of NCAP, coverage of cities in NCAP is quite limited. NCAP covers more than 100 cities, so 132 cities are covered under the NCAP, but that's quite limited. If we go as per the revised standards of air quality guidelines by WHO, it will make many other cities of our country as polluted, as having pollution levels above the safe limits. And that's why the coverage needs to be expanded, not just for the pollutants, but for the cities as well. So these 3 changes are required. The targets, they need to be revised. 20 to 30% जो reduction है, that target needs to be revised. More pollutants need to come under the ambit of NCAP, and more cities need to come under the ambit of NCAP. These 3 changes are required in NCAP. And now WHO says that there is irrefutable, so you are just concluding that there is enough of scientific evidence now which shows that air pollution affects all aspects of the human health, and therefore NCAP should be made in sync with the revised guidelines of WHO, which could be the closing statement. So air pollution remains one of the major concerns of India's environmental pollution scenario. Repeatedly, UPSC has been seen to be asking questions on air pollution by asking questions on NCAP. The next is disaster management. Discuss about the vulnerability of India to earthquake related hazards. Give examples including the salient features of major disasters caused by earthquakes in different parts of India during the last 3 decades. Now the challenge, real challenge with this question is, there are 2 challenges. One, you may not know enough of examples. Secondly, if you know enough of content, you may run out of word limit. This was one of those questions wherein you have to put in a lot of content in case you know everything, but UPSC does not give you the luxury of words and luxury of time. Nonetheless, another thing, during the course of preparation, many a time we tell students to prepare the case studies. Now students often find preparing case studies is unuseful. Rather, when I take the disaster management classes, I keep the lectures replete with examples. And this is where knowing the examples come in handy. These are the kind of questions where knowing more and more examples from the disasters comes in handy, because UPSC in this question, as you can see, has asked you examples of disasters in the last 30 years. Disasters which were caused by earthquakes. So if I try to interpret this question, interpreting this question is that UPSC is basically asking you the consequences of earthquakes, that is earthquake related hazards. What hazards originate from earthquakes? Earthquake related hazards. So over here, you must know these statistics. For the major disasters which affect our country, you must know the statistics that how much area of India's, how much percentage of India's area is vulnerable to what kind of disaster. These statistics come in very handy in your mains examination. So as per NDMA, over 59%, that's almost 60% of India's TGA, India's total geographical area, is prone to earthquakes of moderate to severe intensity. That can be the opening statement, and if 60% of India's total geographical area is vulnerable, it means that India becomes highly prone to earthquake-related hazards. So what are the earthquake-related hazards? Now, second part of the question says, second statement in the question says, give examples including salient features of major disasters caused by earthquakes in different major disasters caused by earthquakes. So it is not just asking you about earthquake, but what earthquake has subsequently led to. Like disasters often have a cascading impact. That's a domino effect of a disaster, right? So that's the question over here. So you can integrate the examples with the first part of the question, that's vulnerability of India to earthquake related hazards. You discuss that and you integrate examples with that. That way you save the word limit as well. So India is vulnerable to following earthquake related hazards. The first one is collapsing structures, buildings, infrastructure, bridges, roads. So collapsing structures, which itself becomes a hazard because it causes human casualties, it causes loss of critical infrastructure as well. Case in point, now you have to give examples from the previous 30 years, case in point, the 2001 Bhuj earthquake. And when you prepare the examples in disaster management, when you prepare the examples, know some basic statistics about the examples as well, like the magnitude of the earthquake happened in 2001, magnitude greater than 7. Nobody expects you to know the exact magnitude 7.1 tha, 7.7 tha. Yes, that much of information can be a bit too much to be knowing. But a general idea that it was a huge one, it was a major one with magnitude greater than 7, that's what is needed in the examination. And this one caused more than 10,000 deaths, injured lakhs of people, and it collapsed thousands of the buildings and the structures. So collapsing buildings, other critical infrastructure becomes very first earthquake related hazard. The second earthquake related hazard, and this is the seismic hazard map of India, in case you have time, a quick earthquake zonation in the country. Which regions are vulnerable to earthquakes of what intensity? So we have 4 zones in our country. You can prepare, you can study this map and you can draw it quickly in the examination if the time permits. But if it doesn't permit, nonetheless, you can move on. The next one is tsunami. So tsunami, both the east coast, the west coast, the island territories, they are vulnerable to tsunamis. Tsunamis can be caused by underwater earthquakes, undersea earthquakes, and 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami is an example, which was triggered by the Sumatran Andaman earthquake, which was again a big one, having its magnitude more than 9. And it killed lakhs of people across the Indian Ocean region. There were multiple countries of Indian Ocean region which were affected, India being one of them. So that's the most prominent example of tsunami which you can mention while discussing tsunami as an earthquake related hazard. The third earthquake related hazard is co-seismic landslides and avalanches, which happen in the Himalayan region. The Himalayas are vulnerable to landslides because of heavy rainfall, extreme weather events, cloudburst, along with that because of earthquakes. Like the 2015 Nepal earthquake triggered series of avalanches around the Mount Everest. So the snow-covered peaks, they become vulnerable to co-seismic avalanches, and they become vulnerable, the steep slopes, they become vulnerable to co-seismic landslides. So that's the third earthquake related hazard which you mentioned. And you can remember some 2015 मैंने तो Nepal earthquake बोला, so you have to give examples from India. So back in 1990s, there were two major earthquakes which happened in the state of Uttarakhand. One was Chamoli in 1999, another was in 1991 in Uttarkashi. I can mention both of them, which triggered multiple landslides. And then this one, I don't think many of you would be mentioning that landslides can further dam the river courses as the debris gets collected, accumulated. They can dam the river courses, which leads to formation of quake lakes. We call them as quake lakes, and as and when, because of the hydrostatic pressure, sooner or later the quake lake will breach, and then it causes flooding downstream. So in 1951, there was a massive Assam earthquake which resulted in this kind of flooding in the downstream region because of damming of Dihang river, Brahmaputra's tributary. So though that example I have not mentioned over here because examples are from the previous 30 years, but this one, formation of the quake lakes and flooding because of breach of the quake lakes, I am not very sure how many of you could remember that and write that. The next one is reservoir-induced seismicity. Now, reservoir-induced seismicity leads to collapsing of the dams and flooding. And the most prominent example of this is the Koina earthquake 1967. तो मैम ये तो 30 year पहले हो गया, हाँ 30 year पहले हो गया, but there is no such major example of RIS in our country fortunately after that. So that's why this is what we can mention. है ही नहीं तो यही mention करोगे फिर. We are left with no choice, so you mention this one. And then soil liquefaction, again another consequence which I am not very sure how many could recollect to write. So RIS, quake lakes and soil liquefaction. The other earthquake related hazards, most of you would have mentioned, but probably not this one. So soil liquefaction, now this happens when there is saturated or partially saturated soil which substantially loses its strength under the applied stresses. So when we have seismic stresses being applied, partially saturated soil may substantially lose its strength and start to behave like a liquid, which means that the buildings and the other structures which have their foundation over such ground, they lose their support. It's as good as that they are floating over a liquid. Now, India per se is not vulnerable to soil liquefaction, though there have been massive damages caused by soil liquefaction in other parts of the world. 2010, there was an earthquake in Canterbury of New Zealand which caused massive damage due to soil liquefaction. Similarly, 2011 earthquake of Japan, the Fukushima one, which caused the Fukushima nuclear accident as well, that caused soil liquefaction in different parts of Japan as well. But in India, I said that mostly India is not vulnerable to the hazard of soil liquefaction, but there are studies which suggest that certain regions of northeastern India like Assam are vulnerable to it. So you can mention that. And then you conclude your answer by mentioning that since India is vulnerable to host of earthquake related hazards, therefore multi-hazard early warning systems and incorporating other structural measures becomes an utmost priority for our country.
Hello everyone, my name is Satvir Singh and I will be discussing the internal security part from the GS paper 3, and this time you see UPSC has asked 4 questions from the internal security part and they are carrying something around a weightage of around 50 marks. So let's start off with our first question that is related to money laundering, where they have asked a question regarding what is the role of emerging technologies as well as globalization in promotion of money laundering. And simultaneously they have also asked about the international as well as the national framework related to this money laundering part. Now, see, before we start off with the proceedings, you see there are certain set of keywords that we need to decode as regards answer writing is concerned. I have just opened up the dimensions, various dimensions related to this money laundering part. Like in such questions, these questions are direct questions. You can directly start off with the definition, like what is the definition of money laundering. What is the definition of money laundering? Like you can just write in 20 words or 25 words, like it is more of an act of concealing as well as disguising the illegitimate money that has been attained from the organized crimes such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, etc., and how this money is the one which is channelized into the banking system so that it appears as if it has come from a legitimate sources. There are activities like smurfing, there are activities like gambling. Apart from that, shell companies are the one which are used for the sake of money laundering. Now, secondly, we need to discuss what is the role of globalization. See, as regards the role of globalization is concerned, in the second part or in this role of globalization part, you can mention the points like the confluence of global market system, confluence of the global markets, they have greatly contributed to money laundering, specifically when it comes to the international trade, when it comes to the expansion of the financial system, Along with that, you see there are alternative banking systems that have developed. These banking systems are also known as trust-based banking systems. They are known by different names in different countries. Like in India and Pakistan, they are known as Hawala. If we talk about China, in China it is known as Finchen. In case of China. Now, globalization has also created the tax havens. There are a number of countries which have emerged as tax haven, and simultaneously these tax havens are also accompanied by banking secrecy laws. They don't provide the information related to the bank accounts. There are offshore bank accounts. Which have been created. Now, along with that, what you will see, there are a number of shell companies. Which have been created. They are producing fake invoices as well as a number of fake balance sheets are the one which are also prepared. By such companies during the transfer of goods as well as services at the international level. So this is how the globalization, these are some important points which can be mentioned. Now, if we can talk about the role of technology, so you see, technology also has played a very significant role. You might have heard of something we call as wire transfers. These wire transfers are the one which are done via electronic messages. And if we talk about these electronic messages, the human intervention is to the minimum. It is a kind of automated banking system. It is technology based banking system. Here you will find the intervention on part of the human is something which is minimum, and that is facilitating the money laundering to the maximum. Then we have the concept of megabyte money. If we talk about this megabyte money, so what you can see in the megabyte money, it is the transfer of money via computer symbols across the world. Now, these days there are application based transfers. Are there in the global world. There are application based transfers. This is specifically happening in a number of activities such as gambling, such as what you can say the jackpot, the immediate jackpot that sometimes is won. Now, along with that, you see cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency has become the new form of hawala, specifically when we talk about Bitcoin, because of the anonymous nature of the Bitcoin transaction, it is very difficult to trace the Bitcoin. In fact, if we talk about this Bitcoin, so Bitcoins have also been deployed for the sake of terror financing. So money laundering also has got a relation with the terror financing. Money laundering can be used for the sake of terror financing also. So this is, you see, how that technology as well as globalization can contribute to the problem of money laundering. On the next, if we can talk about the national as well as the international framework as a part of the anti-money laundering practices at the, or you can say they can also be recognized as efforts at international level or at national level, international level and national level. Now if we talk about international level, here you can find the mention of Vienna Convention. You can mention Vienna Convention. Along with the Vienna Convention, there is FATF, Financial Action Task Force. And along with this FATF, specifically you can mention the famous 40 recommendation of this FATF. The famous 40 recommendations on part of this FATF. Then there are Basel norms. Basel norms. You see, the Basel norms can also be accepted as the norms which promote, or you can say which can be a part of our anti-money laundering practices. Along with that, what you can see is there is 1919 Convention of European Council, 1919 Convention of this European Council that can also be taken into account. There is the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes that specifically talks about keeping a check onto the money laundering practices, etc. Now, these are some international framework that can be discussed. Now, along with that, if we talk about the framework that are available at the national level, so in India, we have an act called Pmla. You can write a line or two about Pmla 2002, and it has been amended a number of times, like 2009, 2012 and 2018 to tackle the problem of money laundering. Simultaneously, there is this FIU India, Financial Intelligence Unit of India, which is also working and analyzing the data related to money laundering, specifically at international level, and also sharing the database with a number of counterparts. Now, along with that, you see, along with this FIU, we also have Enforcement Directorate, we also have Economic Offences Wing in Central Bureau of Investigation, that can also be mentioned under that. Now we also have Benami Transaction Act. Benami Transaction Act. This Benami Transaction Act can also be mentioned as a mechanism to deal with the problem of money laundering at national level. We have a very huge content, but that is something which has to be summarized in 150 words. And that is where the art of your answer writing actually lies. Now, at the end, you also have to give a way forward. At the end, you also have to give a way forward. Now, if we talk about this way forward, just try to summarize this way forward in a line or two, like the use of big data analytics, the use of artificial intelligence, the international artificial intelligence based system, the international cooperation is something which need to be facilitated, which need to be promoted. There is a dire need to strengthen the already existing domestic framework related to money laundering, etc., to curb the menace of money laundering. So this is how you can actually contain this money laundering, or you can say any comprehensive topic for that matter, within 150 words. So you have to be very short, you have to be very sharp as regards writing the answers, specifically the limited answers, or you can say the answers in the limited words is concerned. So this was the first question that the UPSC has asked. Now we will be moving on to our second question, and that is, keeping in view India's internal security, analyze the impact of cross-border cyber attacks and discuss the defensive measures against these sophisticated attacks. Again, it is something which is to be written in 150 words. It's a very easy question. Again, it's a very direct question, and you see every single year there is definitely a question from cyber security in the internal security. Now, here you can directly start off with the definition of cyber crime. Here you can definitely start off with definition of a cyber crime or definition of a cyber attack, as if cyber attack or cyber crime refers to an act of intrusion into any computer architecture for the sake of damaging, vandalizing it, for the sake of any what you can say breach of privacy, or just changing the format of data, etc., as it has happened in the case of recent case of ransomware, etc. So this is in a very generalized word. You have to start off with definition. You have to start off with the definition of cyber attack. Now, next thing that you have to see is that the recent cyber attacks, and these recent cyber attacks, here they have specifically mentioned, keeping in view of the India's internal security, analyze the impact of cross-border cyber attacks. So there have been a number of cyber attacks, like you can mention the name of few. There is this group Red Echo of China, which is responsible for ShadowPad, the ShadowPad attack. Okay, the ShadowPad attack went onto the Mumbai electricity grid, and this Mumbai electricity grid was like the operations of the Mumbai electricity grid were the one which were halted for few hours because of this shadow. Now, overall, what could be the impact of these cyber attacks onto the internal security of country? So you see, these recent cyber attacks, they can have a negative impact onto the security of critical information infrastructure. Critical information infrastructure refers to that information infrastructure whose corruption or disruption will eventually have a very negative impact onto what we call as a nation's security. That could be internal as well as external. Like it could be the data related to the power sector, it could be the data related to the banking sector, it could be the data related to the space activities, military activities. And in the wake of what you can say the lack of physical barriers, because you see in the cyber space there is no physical barrier, and the development of latest techniques and tools by the cyber criminals, it has played or you can say the cyber space of India is something which is threatened to the maximum, specifically when it comes to the security of critical information infrastructure. Now, what could be the possibility? Another possibility that can be explored over here is the financial loss. Specifically, these days you people might have heard in the newspaper, or you can say read in the newspaper about the SBI ATM attacks, the Salami attacks. So these are the financial loss, and apart from that, you see the number of cyber crimes. The number of cyber crimes in India have increased to 200 to 300% in the recent times. That is a fact which can also be mentioned over here. Now, you see this cyber terrorism is a part of a proxy warfare, because here the direct confrontation between the two powers is something which is not involved. So as a part of the proxy warfare, it can be used as a mechanism. It can be used as a mechanism to promote the cyber terrorism. It can be used for psychological warfare. It can be used for social engineering. Now, if we talk about all these factors, so you see they play a very important and key role as regards the internal security of the country is concerned. Now, along with that, you see there is the propaganda warfare. there are continuous attacks onto the government websites, attacks on the government website. So these continuous attacks onto the government website, etc. So all these factors, because of the increasing cyber attacks across the border, or you can say cross-border cyber attacks, they play a very important and dominant role as regards the Indian internal security is concerned. Now you can just write a line or two about it, you need not to go into the much deeper explanation related to this. Now in the second part, what they have asked is, what is the mechanism? What is the mechanism which is available? What is the major? So in the second part, what they have asked is, what is the mechanism which is available related to cyber security? Second part, you see, they have asked about what is the available mechanism, or what is the defensive mechanism that we are having related to the cyber security, or as regards the protection from such cyber attacks is concerned. So here we can talk about, you can say, the existing mechanism, and this existing mechanism can also be divided into two categories. First, you can see, you can talk about the institutions, what are the available institutions, and in the second part you can talk about the policy related to, you can say, the as regards the matter of cyber security is concerned. So under the institution, you can just write a line or two about certain NTRO, and you see this is NCIIPC is also there. Along with NCIIPC, NCCC is also there. Now along with the NCCC, NIB is also there. I4C. These institutions are already existing as regards our cyber security mechanism is concerned. Under policy, we have cyber security policy 2013, and along with that we have Indian IT Act. We have Indian IT Act that criminalizes a number of cyber crime. Along with that, we also have a national telecom policy. National telecom policy. Simultaneously, these agencies are also using the techniques like big data analytics under NetGrid, under the NetGrid part. Along with that, we also are having the software which has been developed by DRDO called Netra to look into the issue of cyber security. So these are the available mechanisms that we are having related to the cyber security of India is concerned.
So this question says, do you agree that the Indian economy has recently experienced V-shaped recovery? Give reasons in support of your answer. So this is asking that, did we actually achieve V-shaped recovery? So how should you write the answer for this question? You see, this was the 11th question. There were two parts of this question. First, did Indian economy experience V-shaped recovery? This was the first question. And second, what are the reasons? Give reasons to support your answer. So if you feel India has experienced V-shaped recovery, give reasons. If you feel India has not, give reasons in both the cases, right? This is the structure which you have to use in the exam, all right? So let me explain what this says. So for example, look at this please. So first of all, in this question, it's very important to understand that they are talking about recovery, that has India recovered through V-shape or not. But what happens before recovery? Why are you trying to recover? You are trying to recover because you must have fallen into some kind of crisis, because only if you are in crisis you will recover, which means India is experiencing slowdown. Hence people are asking, is India recovering through V-shape or not? So we should start by, we should start our answer by saying that the economic slowdown in India is twofold in nature. Number one, we have a pre-COVID slowdown and we have a COVID slowdown. The pre-COVID slowdown happened because of investment slowdown. So not in 2019, but starting from 2017 only, we are having this slowdown. Investment came down, our output reduced. So see, investment reduced, output reduced in the economy, our exports came down, our jobs came down, demand came down. When demand is down, investment is again down. So this is a cycle in which India has been trapped, right? So this was pre-COVID slowdown. We were not able to recover from the pre-COVID slowdown, and COVID slowdown happened. So for example, look at this. Why did COVID slowdown happen? Health crisis, demand side crisis, supply side crisis. Demand side and supply side crisis, why? Because during COVID there is lockdown, factories are shut. When factories are shut, output is not produced, people lose job. When people lose job, they lose income, they don't demand. So your supply is down, your demand is down, and you have a health crisis. This is COVID crisis. So India is suffering from twin crisis. When you suffer from twin crisis, you are actually in a deep crisis. And when you are in a deep crisis, your recovery has to be very, very strong. So in this context, we should judge India's recovery. So see, these crises had a very deep impact on India, hence the recovery is very painful. Now, on what factors does the recovery depend? So recovery depends upon the following factors. Look guys, recovery depends upon the duration of the pandemic, which means how long is your pandemic. Second, effect on job and household income. So during the pandemic, was the job loss and loss of income permanent or was it temporary? All right. Then extent of fiscal and monetary policy intervention. So did Government of India provide enough of fiscal and monetary policy help to people or not? Next is vaccination coverage and efficiency. Was your vaccine useful? Could you take your vaccine to every part of India? And then new variant. So is new variant of COVID coming again? On these factors, your recovery depends. So based on these factors, if you judge, you will find that actually India experienced a V-shaped recovery initially, which means the first phase, India recovered through V-shaped recovery. So in the first phase of COVID, when that happened, we were not ready, nobody was ready in the world, but India was strong enough to face it properly and we could recover through V-shaped recovery. But when the second phase happened, at that time, people started to say that no, now the recovery is not V-shaped, now recovery looks like K-shape. Alright, when the second wave of COVID hit us, it looked like a K-shape. And the third wave of COVID, now people are saying that it could be K or W, right? K or W. So initially, yes, we were recovering through V-shape. Economic survey also talked about it. They gave evidence. But then the debate is whether we are moving from V to K and K to W. These three things have to be written in the exam. All right. So what is a V-shaped recovery, guys? So for that you need to write all this. So for example, this is V-shaped recovery. What is V-shaped recovery? So look at this. This is GDP and this is time. All right. So suppose if there was no COVID, how would the GDP of India look like without COVID? So without COVID, the GDP of India would have looked like this, like this. But when COVID happened, this is the time when COVID happened. When COVID happened, our GDP came down. When our GDP came down, there was a question that what kind of crisis is this? So we saw that, the crisis is little deeper because the first phase, when it hit India, the first phase did not end in 15 days or 20 days. It lasted for a few months. When it lasted for a few months, what happened is, when the economy was normal, people were consuming normal things, like I was buying a mobile phone, I was going out on vacation. But when the pandemic was there for few months, 3, 4 months, 6 months lockdown, I did not buy mobile phone. I did not go for any vacation. And even after things opened up and lockdown was removed, since I was having financial crisis, I postponed many of my expenditures and I controlled my hands. I did not spend too much money. I became conservative. So what happens? When crisis hit us, since the crisis was little prolonged, so economy started to go down, down and down, and then recovery was taking time. Recovery was not like this. Recovery took time. Fine. And then slowly things were coming on track. And what is the assumption here? The assumption is that why were we seeing recovery? Because after the first phase, people were getting back to life, they were doing their jobs, the job loss and income loss was not permanent for everyone in the economy. Hence, we started to recover. And how do we know? Because our vaccination drive was going good. In the economy, consumption and investment started to increase. Service sector showed positive growth. Agriculture showed positive growth. And we saw that in the year 2021 and 22, our growth rate was 11%. All these things showed that, we were going through a V-shaped recovery. What are the symptoms of V-shaped recovery? In V-shaped recovery, you see the crisis is slightly longer, which means it's longer than 15 days or 1 month. The demand is gone. In a V-shaped recovery, we don't postpone. Like if I have to buy a mobile phone, so I won't postpone mobile phone buying. I'll completely forget about it. I will not buy mobile phone because my economy is in crisis for 5-6 months. I don't have money. So when these things happen, then the recovery happens through a V shape. All right. Now, let's see why people are saying that we have moved away from V-shaped recovery. If India would have completed V-shaped recovery, what would have happened? So for example, this was our GDP before crisis. This is crisis, right? After crisis, we were recovering. If V-shaped recovery would have completed, our economy would have been here. Original growth path, 7-8%, 9% rate of growth. But it is not happening, which means we have not been able to recover. Something has changed here. What has happened? So people are saying that what has happened is, this looked like our recovery path. So our economy was going like this. This is COVID. When COVID happened, we came down and then we started to grow. But then something went wrong. Second wave came and all these problems came. So what happened is, some sectors of India and those people who are so-called rich and who have resources, they kept on improving and another India kept on coming down. So now India has been divided into two parts. One where things are positive and they are bouncing back, and one India is there which is going down. So when COVID repeatedly happens and when you have one wave after another, then there is something negative that happened in the second wave of COVID, that the effect of COVID and impact reached rural areas also. The rural areas, the lower middle class, the poor people, they got affected more, which means they are not able to, they are not able to rebound. In fact, they are going down. And people who were belonging to slightly better, category in terms of income, in terms of job, business people, they are doing better. So now, so what has happened is, India looks like this now. So one India is here going up, one India is going here. So rich are becoming richer, poor are becoming poorer. How do you know that India is going through a K-shaped recovery? I said rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer. So if we can find a data which proves that income inequality in India is increasing, that means we must be going through K-shaped. And is it happening? Yes. There is data which shows income inequality in India is actually increasing. Second, if after COVID, like after phase 2, when recovery is happening, the sale of four-wheeler, which means sale of cars in India has gone up and sale of bikes and two-wheeler has gone down. What does it show? Who will buy cars? These people, so-called rich. And those poor and low middle income group, they are not going to buy cars. So they used to buy two-wheelers. Now they are not buying two-wheelers also. So if I look at the consumption pattern and what is being sold in the economy, I can find out if this is K-shaped recovery or not. And do we see the sale of four-wheeler going up and two-wheeler going down? Yes. So if you look carefully, this is what India is going through. Some sectors and some people are recovering, some are doing bad. So services, for example, those services which use digital technology, work from home, they have recovered. Manufacturing, supply chain, logistic, tourism, they are not doing good, right? Now, what is the evidence? Because UPSC is saying you have to give reasons for your answer, evidence for your answer. Evidence is, I told you, that income inequality is increasing. Some sectors are doing good, some are not doing good. So there is a divergence. And that divergence looks like K-shape. You see, this is how K-shape looks. Somebody is doing good, some is doing bad. I told you about consumption also. that sale of four-wheelers went up, sale of two-wheelers came down between October 2020 and January 2021. So it looks as if from January 2021 onwards, there were some symptoms of India similar to K-shaped recovery. But then something has happened in the economy. Now we have a new wave, and this UPSC exam happened with a new wave. So you know what currently India looks like. So this would have been the normal India. But here you faced COVID, you see, COVID. When COVID happened, we slowed down, right? So we slowed down. When we slowed down, we started to show V-shaped recovery, see, V-shaped recovery. But then, again there is one new wave and variant of COVID. So we were showing V-shaped recovery, we were about to reach our previous level of growth, but again we came down. And now we are going down, and now we are trying to go up. So people are saying that India will go up and someday India will reach here. So it looks like a W-shaped recovery which might happen. So between K and W there is a debate. So K, people are saying K for sure, many experts, even Dr. Raghuram Rajan also said it. But now they are saying that we might experience W-shaped. When does W-shaped recovery happen? When you have one COVID, another COVID, then it keeps on happening, right? So this is the answer to the question. All right, next question. Next question is related to this one. It says, investment in infrastructure is essential for more rapid and inclusive economic growth. Discuss in the light of India's experience. This is a very interesting question. I'll show you what this question says. You see, this question says that, question number 12, it says this is India's infrastructure. Now the question is saying that if you promote infrastructure, will it promote economic growth at a very fast pace? Will it lead to very high paced economic growth? And if you promote infrastructure, is it also going to lead to inclusive growth? See, growth and inclusive growth are different. Growth means the country is growing. Inclusive growth means when the country is growing, the benefits of the growth reaches every corner of the country. Everybody benefits. That is inclusive growth. So the question is saying that if you promote infrastructure, will it lead to growth as well as inclusive growth? So do you agree to this? Yes. Growth means, see, cash, money, growth. Inclusive growth means everybody gets a part of that cash. So does infrastructure have that power to show this effect? Let's see. This is how you have to answer the question. How? See guys, so in this question, this is infrastructure. You have to divide your answer in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and then conclusion. So what is the first box? Let me show you the boxes. So first box is this. First box says that you see India is becoming more urban, isn't it? So when your country is becoming more urban, when there is a growing middle class in the country, what do these people demand? Urbanized people and middle class people, they demand some basic infrastructure like health, education, transportation, metro, mobile network and all these things, right? So these things are their demand. Now if you look at if you provide them infrastructure, don't you think that this category called urbanized category or the service class people, they will perform better, the productivity of the economy will go up, right? They will contribute more. So this is the argument. Second is that, and you have to provide it, otherwise your economic growth will be impacted. And second is that if you provide infrastructure, is it going to help different sectors of the economy? Look at agriculture. If you provide a road which connects a village with a mandi, if you create more warehouse and cold storage, if you give good means of transportation, don't you think farmers will get easy access to market, their income will increase, GDP will increase, right? So this will happen, supply chain will become better. Similarly, can you create industries without giving basic infrastructure like roads, electricity, waste management? Impossible. So for creation of industries, you need infrastructure. For services also, do you think that IT services, finance related services can work without basic infrastructure like broadband connection and power and all these things? Impossible. So if you want your urbanization to happen smoothly, if you want your service class to work properly, if you want agriculture, industry and services to function, you have to give infrastructure. All right. So this is one argument. And see, we did not give proper infrastructure to manufacturing. What is the result today? Our manufacturing base is not good. We did not give good infrastructure to agriculture. Even agriculture has not reached its potential. These are the problems we have done. And if we don't give good infrastructure to services, tomorrow some other country is going to beat us in services also. All right. Second, you see in economics there is something called as multiplier effect. I'll tell you what is multiplier effect. So for example, if you construct more roads, two things will happen. Number one, in road construction, you will provide more employment. You will buy more inputs like machines, you will buy cement and all those things. So raw material consumption will go up. You will provide more employment to people. So this will lead to more GDP, right? Similarly, if the road construction is complete, don't you think that it will take less time to travel from one place to another? So cost of transportation will come down, time wastage will reduce. So if you add all the benefits of infrastructure, you will see that according to Reserve Bank of India, according to World Bank, they have made a calculation and they say that for a country like India, if we invest 1 rupee in creation of infrastructure, our GDP might increase by 2.5 to 3.5 rupees. Invest 1 rupee in infrastructure, your GDP will grow by almost 3 rupees. Why? Because creation of road has a very positive effect in terms of employment creation and in terms of reducing the travel time, travel cost and everything, right? So this is called multiplier effect. Third is crowding in. So guys, if you construct more infrastructure, like bring good electricity, create more roads, warehouses and all, don't you think private sector will invest more in industries? That is called as crowding in. If government invests in road, private sector will also come and invest in creation of manufacturing units and industries. A little bit investment by government will bring this much investment by private sector. This is called as crowding in effect. So infrastructure has the capacity to bring crowding in effect also. Similarly, if you bring good infrastructure, it will create more jobs. As I said, if you create more roads, warehouses, etc. in this country, what are the different kinds of jobs that will be created? You see, when you create infrastructure, there is a scope to give job to highly skilled people, semi-skilled people and low-skilled people also. So if I am an agricultural laborer, I don't have much job in my field, right? Why? Disguised unemployment. So what will I do? If I am a laborer, either I will sit just like that in the village being jobless, or I can go and participate in the road construction as a worker. So infrastructure has a huge scope of giving different types of employment opportunities, right? So this farmers' income will improve, health will improve in the economy if you give more health infrastructure and all these things. So this you have to write. Last part is balanced regional development. So guys, do you feel that India is a big country, so India should focus on construction of industries and roads in only one part? No. If we don't connect all the parts of India, development will not reach every corner of the country. Infrastructure is like a backbone of the economy. If you have good roads connecting Delhi with Northeast, automatically flow of professionals, flow of ideas, money will happen from Delhi to Northeast. Northeast will also develop. So if you don't have infrastructure, balanced regional development can never happen. So infrastructure is needed for balanced regional development also. These are the things that you have to write in this answer. You cannot miss upon any of the boxes in the answer. Even if you write 2 sentences, but you have to write it. Now, so how should you conclude this answer? You should conclude this answer by saying that the government of India currently is putting a lot of efforts in infrastructure through schemes like National Infrastructure Pipeline, where the government of India is planning to invest 100 lakh crore rupees in next 5 years between the year 2020 and 2025. Government of India plans to invest more than 100 lakh crore rupees. What is National Monetization Pipeline? The government of India is trying to use some of its infrastructure assets like roads, stadium, mobile towers, railway, and the government of India is trying to involve private sector, give those things for maintenance and upgradation to private sector and earn money through National Monetization Pipeline. Similarly, and Government of India is trying to earn at least 6 lakh crore rupees through monetization pipeline in next 4 years. So you have special economic zones which are meant for export, you have industrial corridor to promote industrialization in different parts of India, and then you have mega food park schemes to promote food processing industries. Then you have PM Gati Shakti for looking at smooth creation of infrastructure in India. You have this PM Gati Shakti which was launched recently. So you should write that the Government of India has launched these important initiatives. So if you write your answer like this, guys, you will get very good marks because this structure covers all the points related to infrastructure. Now we come to the next question. So see, in this question, you have question number 13 which says, what are the salient features of the National Food Security Act 2013? How has the Food Security Bill helped in eliminating hunger and malnutrition in India? 250 words. You have to write little more in this. Right? I would call this question also as a basic question because everyone who is preparing for UPSC is expected to know at least this. So let's see how many parts are there in this question. There are 2 parts of this question, A and B. First part question says, salient features of National Food Security Act 2013. So it's a flat question. You have to write down all the features, but don't write unnecessary sentences and words. Write only precise things. Second part says, what is its role in eliminating hunger and malnutrition? You have to discuss that role, right? So what are the features? Before features, you have to give a good introduction of the answer, right? So what is the introduction to this answer? Now in the introduction, you should write a very powerful introduction to impress the examiner. So what shall you write? You should write that National Food Security Act was created to increase the access to sufficient and nutritious food for an active and healthy life, right? So why was this act created? To increase access to sufficient and nutritious food for active and healthy life. It subsidized food grains for 2/3 of the population of India, close to 66% people. For them, it subsidized the food grain price, it reduced the price. And it moved away from welfare to right-based approach. So earlier the Government of India used to say that we are a welfare society, we want to do good for the country, so we will give food to people. Now the Government of India said no, it's not about welfare and doing charity for people. Now food is a right. So those people who are covered under the act, they have the right to demand food, and if they don't get food, government has to compensate them. They have the legal right now to get food. This is the change in approach. You must write that in the introduction. It will show that you know the soul of the answer. Fine. Now, what are the main features? So in UPSC, you have to be very precise in writing your answer. So these are the main features that you have to write. Of course, you have to convert it into sentences. I have just given you the framework. So for example, what is the coverage of National Food Security Act? So rural area, 75% people will be covered, urban area, 50% people would be covered. What is the entitlement? So what will you get under National Food Security Act? So the state governments, so look at this, identification of beneficiaries is by state government. So every state government has the right to find out who should get the benefit of National Food Security Act. So if the my state government feels that I should get the benefit, I will get 5 kilogram of rice per month at subsidized rate. So I will get rice, wheat, coarse cereals, and what is the price I have to pay? 3 rupees a kg, 2 rupees a kg, or 1 rupees a kg. Alright, these 3 are the prices for rice, wheat and coarse cereals. So, and if I belong to Antyodaya Anna Yojana group, so Antyodaya Anna Yojana is that category of poor people who are the poorest of the poor, which means they are belonging to the lowest strata of the society. They are so poor that we are calling them poorest of the poor. For them, the Government of India is giving 35 kilogram of these cereals, rice, wheat and coarse cereals to them per month, right? Now, as I told you, this point, identification is by state government. Now, along with these things, what are the other benefits of National Food Security Act? Maternity benefits. So for mothers, nutritional support. So for pregnant women and lactating women. So there are pregnant women and there are mothers who are feeding the child. For them, maternity benefit and nutritional support is also given. Women and child empowerment is also happening through National Food Security Act. And in case of non-supply of food grains, so under National Food Security Act, this is the promise that this will be given to people. If this is not given, then food security allowance is given as compensation. So if I am entitled to get food, rice, wheat and coarse cereal, if I am not getting it, then I will get food security allowance. Fine? Now, role of National Food Security Act. You see, this question is very interesting because first of all, it asked you to write all the features of National Food Security Act, and now it says that discuss its role in eliminating or reducing, things related to problems related to nutrition and hunger in India. So there are two parts of this point. So see, what was the second part of the question? What is its role in eliminating hunger and malnutrition? So we are going to divide this part B of the answer into two parts. One, we will write its positive role, and then we will write the things which people are complaining, right? So do you think it's possible that National Food Security Act would have achieved nothing? It's not possible. It has achieved things. But do you think in a big country like India, you can achieve everything in a few years? Impossible. You need time, right? So we are going to divide this discussion into two parts. Look at the first part. The first part of the discussion says that between 2000 and 2015-16, in this duration of time, according to National Family Health Survey, the number of undernourished children in India reduced by 60 million. So this is a good achievement, because if number of undernourished children who are not getting food, hungry children, if it reduced by 60 million, it's a very good achievement. In fact, very recently a survey was done, and in that survey it has been found out that undernourishment and nutritional deficiency has reduced, which means things have become better in quite a few states of India in terms of food and hunger, which is Sikkim, Manipur, Karnataka and Bihar also. In a few things like undernourishment and for example lack of nutrition, there has been slight improvement which has been observed recently. Earlier there was no improvement. Now some recent improvement has been observed. This is a positive thing, right? But now what are the things which are not so positive and which requires our attention? So National Food Security Act is a very good step because it gives you right to food. But then in the Global Hunger Index, recently announced Global Hunger Index, India's rank is 101st. So 116 countries of the world have been ranked, and India's rank is very poor in this. So in fact, there are many experts in the world who are saying that India is one of the most hungry countries of the world, because our rank is very poor in hunger index. All right. Now, between 2014 and 16, you also observe that the number of undernourished, absolute number of undernourished children in India is high. It has reduced for sure, but even after reduction, it's very high, right? Now, in the year 2015-16, we got a hint. This is very interesting. You must write this in the exam, that between 2000 and 2015-16, the number of undernourished children reduced. But after 2015-16, there was a slight hint that the number of undernourished children is again, it looks as if it is on the rise, or the reduction which was happening, it stopped. This was pointed out by some researchers that is it happening actually, and more research needs to be done on this. But there is a doubt that undernourishment is again, either increasing or the improvement is not happening. All right, how do we know? Look at the rank of India, Global Hunger Index. If undernourishment is improving high, why is our rank so bad? So they are saying that is the benefit of National Food Security Act, is it going away? So that is one of the doubts. Now, in terms of child malnourishment, right? Children are not getting proper food. Stunting means for a given age, your height is very less. Underweight means for a given age, your weight is less. So it's worrisome. In India, child malnourishment, stunting and underweight, these three things are very bad for India. If you look at the data, you will find child malnourishment, stunting and underweight is a big problem in India. Now, if you look at the COVID scenario, many researchers have pointed out that because of COVID, undernourishment, all right, and nutritional deficiency is happening. So because of COVID, people lost their job. Because of COVID, we faced health issues. And who took the worst hit of COVID? People with less income, young kids, because they were not getting proper food and nutrition, mothers, and people who are recovering, they require good nutrition, they are not getting it. So it's both a health crisis and economic crisis. And because of that combination, the undernourishment and nutritional deficiency is happening after COVID. Now you have something else in India, which is anemia. If you look at most of the women in India, more than 50% of women in India suffer from anemia, which is lack of iron in the blood. Now these are the same people, when they become parents and when they are feeding children, the children also are not healthy, the mother also is not healthy. So it's a double problem for India, and India needs to take care of this. Through Food Security Act, we were trying, but we have not been able to get good results so far. Then there are these lifestyle diseases and problems like obesity, etc., that also needs to be taken care of in terms of nutrition and health status. So this is how you should write your answer, whereby you should write that role of National Food Security Act should not be looked through a narrow prism. Yes, there are problems because of poor implementation. We have tried to take food grains and cereals and nutrition to almost 2/3 of our population, but through public distribution system, because there are leakages and because the implementation is poorer, we have not been able to achieve our targets. And also COVID has thrown new challenges in front of us, which is an additional challenge compared to what we had expected. So when challenges are new and additional challenges have come, you also have to take additional steps. All right. So these are the things that you should write for this question. Now I hope that you have got a framework for the answer. I have only 2 or 3 suggestions for your UPSC mains. Whenever you write mains in UPSC, make sure that you economize on the words. Don't write unnecessary words and sentences. As far as possible, be very precise. In the introduction, don't write redundant things, please. Write the things which are relevant and which would give a good mirror of the main body of the answer. The examiner should know that you know the answer and you are writing something very concrete in the introduction also, because in 150 words, you cannot waste a paragraph, right? In your UPSC answer, make sure that if you don't have too much of data, so there are many questions where data was required. So for example, National Food Security Act, even with minimum data, you can frame an answer. That is what I tried to show through this. I could have got this part filled with data. I could have given you a table and showed you that you need to write this, but in UPSC it's not possible that you would be able to memorize that much of data. So I thought, why not create an answer for you with minimum data, you could get good marks. This is that way.
Achha, so one of the questions from the topic of agriculture is, what are the present challenges before crop diversification? Question mark. How do emerging technologies provide an opportunity for crop diversification? Question mark. A 15-mark question. So you have to write somewhere around 200-250 words for this. Achha, again, this is a question which is on the expected lines because MSP was in lot of news. So this is directly related to the MSP. Achha, now identify the keywords here. What is the examiner asking you? What are you supposed to write? What are the keywords here? One is challenge. This is one of the keywords. Then the keyword is crop diversification. And then third is emerging technologies. So the keyword is, what are the challenges in crop diversification? And what are the emerging technologies that can help here? So these 3 are the keywords of this question. Achha, when you look at this question, now understand these words very carefully. So yahan par we have written crop diversification. This is not agriculture diversification. If had it been agriculture diversification, then the question would have been, the answer would have been altogether different. So this is just crop diversification. Okay. So if you want to start the question, you will start by telling the examiner that there is a problem of monoculture in the country, and monoculture is leading to altogether a number of different problems. Okay, it is leading to a number of different problems as well. So you will start the answer by saying that since the time of Green Revolution, a system of agriculture has developed in India wherein the farmers are practicing monoculture. Monoculture is a dominant practice in India, wherein rice, wheat, sugarcane, these have emerged as the most important crops, and even in dry areas, farmers are cultivating water-intensive crop. Okay? This leads to problem of groundwater depletion. This is leading to problem of malnutrition in the country. Okay? This is leading to change in the cropping patterns of the country. So you will introduce the question by highlighting the problem of monoculture in India. So first you will have to tell the examiner that there is a need for crop diversification. Okay? So first paragraph has to be on introduction, wherein you will write what is the need for the crop diversification. Second, when you start with the challenges. Okay, when you start with the challenges, now there are challenges for crop diversification. Government wants the farmers to diversify the crops. But one biggest challenge is related to MSP. This is the biggest challenge. That is, the government wants the farmers to diversify to different crops, but the farmers are cultivating crops like rice, wheat and sugarcane only because these crops are associated with a guaranteed procurement, at least in certain states. Okay, so biggest challenge is this related to minimum support price. So though the government might announce MSP for a number of crops, but MSP linked procurement is better developed only for these crops, rice, wheat and sugarcane. So this is the biggest challenge for the policy makers. How do you ask the farmers, how do you motivate the farmers to shift to other crops? So till the time the MSP is given or MSP related procurement is skewed in favor of rice, wheat and sugarcane, it will be very difficult to motivate the farmers to go for crop diversification. This is one. Second can be the seed and planting material. Today when you look at the seeds or the planting material, a number of seeds are developed by the seed companies, but you will notice that the low seed replacement rate still is there for crops like pulses, oilseeds and millets. So crops cultivated in the underdeveloped areas, these are the crops wherein the seed replacement rate is low. So challenge is, if you want to motivate the farmers, if you want the farmers to go for crop diversification, the farmer will go only if the alternate crop will give the farmer the same profit. When there are high yielding varieties available for rice, those similar high yielding, drought resistant, quick yielding varieties should also be made available for the other crops which the government needs to promote. Okay, so other is the question related to, the challenge related to availability and affordability of the seed. Third challenge that we have is with respect to changing the ecosystem or changing or bringing some kind of behavioral change in the farmers. Suppose I am a farmer, I am cultivating crops, like I am cultivating rice. I am cultivating rice since the past 50 years. My father was also cultivating rice. So there is an ecosystem developed. In Punjab, Haryana, a farmer is cultivating rice. Every year the labor migrates to the regions of Punjab and Haryana. These laborers are then used for transplantation. The farmer will harvest rice and then it is sold in the mandi or it is sold to the FCI. So ecosystem for rice cultivation, for wheat cultivation is there. So farmers, like every human being, they are averse to change. So if you want to ask the farmers to diversify their crops, then you will have to train them. I need to know that if rice takes, let's say, 30 rounds of irrigation, how many rounds of irrigation will the green gram take? Or how many rounds of irrigation will the pigeon pea take? So if I'm shifting or if I'm diversifying to crops like pulses, oil seeds, millets, then in that case farmers need to be trained on these things. Okay, we have so many farmers but we have little manpower. So problem is, how do you change the system, the ecosystem which has been developed for those crops, or how do you bring a behavioral change in the farmers? So these are the challenges. Because first you will introduce the topic that we have monoculture problems, then there are certain problems with the monoculture, it is leading to other problems, and then what are the challenges related to the crop diversification, why are we not able to diversify. Then the second part of the question, which says, that how do emerging technologies provide an opportunity for crop diversification? The examiner is very specific here. He is asking you that how will emerging technologies provide an opportunity for crop diversification? You will not write about the policies, but what are you going to write is how will the technology help us in overcoming these obstacles or these problems. Like in case of MSP, you can mention about the price deficiency payment scheme. You can mention about the price deficiency payment scheme. FCI is not procuring most of the other crops because FCI does not need those, or government does not need those crops for sustaining the public distribution system. So they are sold in the market. So what if the farmer sells in the market at the market price and the difference between the MSP and market price is directly credited to the farmer's bank account? Price deficiency payment scheme, which is a form of direct benefit transfer. Or for example, what if the mandi starts functioning well? In the mandis, we have problems of cartelization, lack of transparency, information is not available with the farmers. What if we are able to overcome those problems with the use of technology? Like for example, ENAM, using the ICT, I can have a single unified market in the country where the farmer will have the information about the prices prevailing in different parts of India. The transparency can be brought up and market can work in a state of perfect competition. Okay? So, then in case of seeds, how will the emerging technologies, like for example, the development of GM crops? We are facing shortage of oil seeds. The solution can be GM mustard or DMH11. Development of hybrid seeds or drought resistant varieties. Now, how will you bring this behavioral change in the farmer? What can be traditional techniques? Traditional techniques can be the Krishi Vigyan Kendras, they will provide training to the farmers, they will inform the farmers, or the chopals that we have in the villages, or television programs. But now, how will the emerging technology help here? We have less manpower. Then can I say with the use of ICT, an officer or a trained personnel sitting in Delhi can train farmers of a faraway region of Odisha as well, or a farmer from a region of, let's say, Punjab as well. Extension services can be provided through mobile apps. So video conferencing or the virtual chopal or for example mobile apps, all of these can help in solving these problems that are associated with the crop diversification. Okay? So first you'll introduce the topic, then what are the challenges, and then a subheading, and then what can be the emerging technologies here. Okay? Do not digress from the topic. Write about emerging technologies and how these emerging technologies can overcome or help us in overcoming these challenges. Okay? Then you can write about a small 1 or 2 line in conclusion. Okay, so this was question number 14 of GS paper 3 mains examination.
With the first important question of science and technology here. We can see here what are the research and developmental achievements in applied biotechnology. So what are the research and developmental achievement? How will these achievements help to uplift the poorer sections of the society, So there are 2 components in this question, and we have to write in 250 words. Now what we have to understand is that what are the components of these research and development achievements of the applied biotechnology. What are the components here, and then how they are going to revolutionize in terms of uplifting people, the downtrodden, or bringing the vulnerable section. So unless and until a technology cuts across and enables inclusive growth, then only it should be adopted. So within that, how this applied biotechnology, let's see now. So basically application of biotechnology. Now the tool of biotechnology, that we call it as the recombinant DNA technology or genetic engineering. Now this tool can be used in the field of agriculture, it can be used in the field of health and medicine. These are the major areas. Then apart from that, now agriculture will include here animal husbandry sector also. Agriculture, animal husbandry sector, health and medicine. Then in the field of another one is industrial biotechnology, and then we also use the term blue biotechnology. So blue biotechnology means the marine resources. So applied biotechnology, how we are using this particular tool in the field of agriculture, animal husbandry, health and medicine here. So we will look into the most relevant aspect of this particular health and medicine or medical biotechnology, the applied part. So here applied part is what? The medical biotechnology. So what is the achievement here? Recombinant vaccine. Recombinant vaccines. These recombinant vaccines to control. So first of all, vaccine is the cost effective tool which increases accessibility, affordability of quality health care. So this is a preventive measure to control life threatening infectious diseases. So with that perspective, if we look into the contribution achievement here and how it helps society, then we can take the example of COVID Suraksha mission of India. So under this, India developed world's first DNA vaccine. world's first DNA vaccine. So, this world's first DNA vaccine, that we call it as the ZyCoV-D, world's first DNA vaccine. Similarly, recombinant vaccine like viral vector vaccine, example Covishield. So, this is the major vaccine we are using to control the pandemic. Then mRNA vaccine. mRNA vaccine. So, all these are important contribution, achievements. The greatest or the breakthrough of this century is the DNA and the mRNA vaccine. It has never been used earlier, but now it has been successfully used to control the pandemic. So, we are pulling off these different vaccines and putting into the bouquet of COVAX facility. COVAX facility. So, this is the international facility that helps in distribution, accessibility of COVID-19 vaccine to the different other countries who do not have the technology. Although we still have vaccine divide, but still the technology itself, the biotechnology, applied part medical biotechnology has played a significant role to control the pandemic. So, if we compare the year 2020 with 2021, there is a huge difference, and that difference is due to the what? The recombinant DNA technology, medical biotechnology applied part here in terms of the accessibility of vaccine. So, to reduce morbidity, mortality, vaccines play a significant role here. Now, apart from this controlling that is pandemic with the help of vaccine, there is another important contribution that to control the COVID-19 pandemic or SARS-CoV-2 virus. So, to control the pandemic caused by SARS-CoV-2 virus, another important tool, the important research and development aspect is the genome sequencing. Genome sequencing. So, genome sequencing help us identify any changes in the genetic code or mutation any changes in the genetic code or mutation in the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 virus. So, by identifying the change in genetic code, the spike protein, we are able to study the behavior of the virus, how the virus spreads, how it is evolving. For example, the recent that is classification based on whether the virus comes under variant of interest or variant of concern. So, in order to classify the virus in the right category, we need the help of what? The genome sequencing of the virus. So, for example, in case of Omicron, so if you look into the changes in the Omicron genetic code when compared with the Delta, the previous variant, which is although simultaneously present both of them now. So, based upon how the pandemic is behaving or the virus is behaving, we can see that in the day-to-day life that how Omicron has 3 times greater transmissibility. 3 times greater transmissibility, and it is milder than the Delta variant. So, we are studying now the pattern how the virus is behaving and correlating with the genome sequencing data. So, this helps in stricter surveillance and monitoring of the pandemic for a robust public health response, so that our health infrastructure does not get overwhelmed. So this is how medical biotechnology is helping us to control pandemic. It is not only restricted to India but entire world now that is going for genome sequencing of this, the virus here. So that is the important component of this, the application part of medical biotechnology. If we try to analyze this application in a more comprehensive manner, so DNA recombination technology, we can see here recombinant proteins. So just now we discussed recombinant protein. So recombinant protein, already the medical biotechnology is helping in terms of therapeutic protein like insulin protein to treat diabetes mellitus type 1, or tissue plasminogen activator to dissolve the blood clot to reduce the risk of, that is, the heart attack in the individual. Monoclonal antibodies, so specific monospecific antibodies targeting the antigen of the virus are also being developed by using what? An important applied part of the medical biotechnology. Then we have the molecular diagnostics, we discussed transgenic animal. So transgenic animal, genetically modified animal. So this transgenic animal application part we will see here in the animal husbandry sector, how we are utilizing it. Now gene therapy that is to treat genetic diseases like sickle cell anemia or hemophilia, can they be treated or not? So replacing the wrong sequence of gene with the right sequence of gene in terms of the gene therapy here. So that is an important component here. Now regarding transgenic animal here, so now we can see another applied part here, the stem cell research here. In stem cell research, induced pluripotent stem cells. So Nobel Prize medicine has already been awarded in this area. Shinya Yamanaka, using this particular mice, adding pluripotent factors or embryonic, so we have the embryonic stem cell which can transform into any cell type of the body. So that is pluripotency. So same pluripotency genes identified factors from them, isolated, when it is introduced into a somatic cell, that somatic cell can be induced to behave like embryonic like stem cell, and that is known as induced pluripotent stem cell. So by using a person's own skin cell, now scientists had demonstrated they can develop any type of cell in the body, that is whether the heart muscle cell, because there are various cells that do not regenerate like due to spinal cord injury or heart muscle cell death in heart attack. So such type of diseases where there is no regeneration capability, that can be addressed by using these induced pluripotent stem cell research. So we can convert our own skin cell into liver cell, kidney cell, any cell type of the body, because we are able to now identify those pluripotency biological traits or the factors which are being shown here, OCT4, SOX2, CMYC, these are the factors here, pluripotency factors. So this is one important application to the society. Already we discussed about the world first COVID-19 vaccine, that is COVID-19 DNA vaccine in collaboration with the Zydus Cadila and the Department of Biotechnology. So then we can see here the different vaccines that we try to depict here. So the viral vector vaccine, RNA vaccine, messenger RNA vaccine, in the lipid nanoparticle DNA vaccine here. So these are the important contributions here, that how we are trying to control the pandemic. So these are the latest current developments in the field of biotechnology here. Then even we can use spike protein of the virus as a vaccine, like Corbevax recently they introduced here. So we can see DNA vaccine, they contain circular DNA encoding. So the vaccine contains the particular gene that codes for the spike protein. So in any case, any type of vaccine that we are trying to develop here, basically the body should express the spike protein. In any type of COVID-19 vaccine, ultimately our own body cell should express the spike protein, and once the SARS-CoV-2 virus, real virus enters, so when we are given this DNA vaccine here into the body, so that will help generate what? SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, which will block the viral infection. So these are the anti-SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, and this is the spike protein. So whether it is mRNA vaccine or DNA vaccine, so they will help develop our own body anti-SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, which will help block the viral attachment or infection. So these are some important developments here. So apart from that, in the field of agriculture, in the field of what? Agriculture. In agriculture, high yielding varieties. So high yielding varieties of crops which are heat resistant, drought resistant, salinity resistant. So that is climate smart crops. So these climate smart crops in the form of genetically modified crops. So we have to understand, for the burgeoning population, food security is a major issue, food security. So in order to address food security issue, we have to ensure to minimize the crop failure. So for that we have to develop what? Those type of crops which are resistant to the environmental stresses, and that will come through what? The recombinant DNA technology, introducing those desired genes into the crops in the form of genetically modified crops here. So we can see here agriculture biotechnology, animal biotechnology. So development of improved crop varieties in terms of yield, better adaptability to abiotic, biotic stress here. Then, so abiotic means environmental resistance basically. Biotic means what? Like the pest resistant crops. Like we introduced the BT cotton against the bollworm pest, or the BT brinjal, which we are yet to introduce. Then there can also be herbicide tolerant crops. Then in case of animal biotechnology, already we discussed, but some more points we can add here is the important quality of germ plasm. So biotechnology helps in cryopreservation here. So germ plasm, that is the superior quality of germ plasm, reproductive traits can be preserved here for increased meat production, milk production, egg production of the birds or the animals here. Now this is the direct linkage with what? For the poor and vulnerable. In a country like India, mixed farming, where we had to provide alternative source of income in terms of backyard poultry or dairy farming or goat farming. So there, preserving superior germ plasm, going for artificial insemination, so that also helps us a lot in terms of the animal biotechnology sector. So we'll see here an example, livestock sector particularly. So some example we have taken like Garol sheep and black Bengal goat in the Sundarban region. So as an entrepreneurial program, in order to have the inclusive growth for the women and also the poor and vulnerable there. So if we are able to provide them superior germ plasm which are disease free, as we can see here, so disease free and superior quality Garol sheep and black Bengal goat based on their typical phenotypic characters and also pedigree or family history, they were selected. So these type of superior quality germ plasm that will enhance the productivity, and that can be distributed to them. So that will help increase their income and also reduce the expenditure on the part of the animal health here. So it plays a vital role in the economy through marketable commodities such as meat, milk, fiber and the skin here. So establishment of clean germ plasm center is a prerequisite for the distribution of healthy kids or lambs to be to the selected farmers. Then we can also see here in terms of the improving animal health through efficacious vaccines, diagnostics, reproductive technologies, genomics, genetic characterization for breed improvement, aquaculture and marine biotechnology. So what is the blue biotechnology actually? So that is related to the fisheries. So how we can select superior quality of seeds here in terms of the fishery, and the new feed development, fish nutrition, breeding and reproduction, post harvest management using the biotechnology here. Then another component is, as we discussed, the industrial biotechnology. So this is about production of enzymes. So this enzyme production, that can be by using microorganisms, including fungus yeast. So this fungus yeast has the commercial importance. Fermentation, used in bakeries and also the brewing industry for alcoholic drinks. So this can also, that is in terms of bakeries or brewing industry. So the fungus is as an important fermenting agent. So that can also provide in terms of the commercial application in terms of industrial biotechnology. So that will also help in employment of people in terms of uplifting the poor and the downtrodden. So basically, if you look into the, once again the question here, so these are the important applications that can be linked. So we have to restrict our words, but we have to diversify the answer related to agriculture biotechnology, marine resources, blue biotechnology, and also the medical biotechnology. So these are the important research activities related to the applied biotechnology, and how will these achievement and help to uplift the poorer sections of the society. Now the next important question is related to the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize in Physics of 2014, so that was jointly awarded to Akasaki, Amano and Nakamura for the invention of blue LEDs. So here, what is the importance of these, the blue LEDs, and how this invention impacted the everyday life of human beings? So this we have to answer in how many words? Again in 250 words here. So first of all, LED stand for light emitting diode. Light emitting diode is basically, it is a semiconductor. Semiconductor means direct source of light. So it can itself provide directly the photons. So this we have to compare with incandescent bulbs. We compare with what? Incandescent bulbs. These incandescent bulbs, how do they function? So we have to heat their filament is heated, and unfortunately the 90% energy lost in heating the filament only, and less than 10% we get the light energy. So highly inefficient electronic device here or lighting device, whereas LEDs, as they are direct source of light, so they are not only saving energy, but also they are promoting cleaner, greener and brighter future. So these LEDs, they have a longer shelf life. So due to longer shelf life, they will also reduce the burden of electronic waste also in the society. Then being energy efficient, these are what? Energy efficient. Being energy efficient, so they will help combat climate change also. One is, it could be solar powered LED. Another one, even if it is fossil fuel based, it is going to save energy and reduce the resources used. So that is the reason why these incandescent bulbs, they are getting gradually replaced by what? The LED bulbs here. Then apart from this, if we look into the other application part here, So LED, as we discussed semiconductor, it could be N type, P type semiconductor. So N type means the electrons and P are the holes. When electrons and holes they meet each other, so this emits wavelength of light. It emits what? Wavelength of light. Is it clear? Now, as it emits wavelength of light, so this can be used here in case of data storage also. So, for example, these blue LEDs. So, blue LED, if in the rainbow part, if you look into, then it has a shorter wavelength, Due to shorter wavelength means frequency is greater here, so that will help in increase data storage density here in terms of DVDs or in terms of storing music and videos. So they have revolutionized electronic device here. Then apart from that, these LEDs, they can also be used for as a disinfectant of water to make it free from. So it can be used to produce UV rays, ultraviolet rays here, which will help clear the water from bacteria, viruses. It can help in sanitizing also, these LEDs. So let's see now more on this. So these are the three scientists, Akasaki, Amano and Nakamura, for the blue LED here. So blue LED filling the world with a new light. So how it is benefit to the mankind? So LEDs, these are more long lasting, we discussed. So incandescent bulbs tend to last 1000 hours. Heat destroys their filament, while fluorescent lamp last 10,000 hours. Whereas an LED will last how many hours? 1 lakh hours, thus greatly reducing what? Material consumption. Then saving energy and resources we already discussed. So in terms of saving energy and resources here, so the new LED require less energy in order to emit light compared to the older light sources. Moreover, they are constantly improved upon. Then about one fourth of world electricity consumption is used for lighting purpose. So the highly energy efficient LED contribute to saving the earth's resources. So that could be their important contribution here in terms of clean, as we discussed, cleaner, greener, brighter future for the planet. So we can see here creating semiconductor. So the light wavelength. So LED technology originates in the same art of engineering that gave us the mobile phones, computers and all modern electronics. We discussed about the N-type layer and the surplus negative electrons, P-type layer insufficient amount of electrons. The light's wavelength depends entirely on the semiconductor. Blue light we discussed appears at short wave end of the rainbow and can only be produced in some materials. Then when blue LED is made to pass through phosphor material, then it emits white LED. So white LED devices or LED television or liquid crystal displays, so they are, that is in the form of the basically the use of blue LED to pass through phosphor to provide the white LED light here. So that has really revolutionized the people in terms of electronic devices or in terms of even combating climate change. So there are numerous benefits now the society is getting by introduction of the LEDs.
The next question, is question 17. Now this one was a 15 marker, the previous 3 were the 10 markers. This one was a 15 marker, describe the major outcomes of COP26 of UNFCCC and what are the commitments made by India in this conference. So you can open your answer by mentioning that the COP26 was held at a very critical time when the first volume of ARC's 6th report, the physical basis of science, says that this is code red for humanity. Now, it was not this report which per se had spelled code red for humanity, but when the United Nations Secretary General was making his speech at the launch of this report, it was him who said that the report says it's code red for humanity. So that's not directly asked in the question, but yes, this report was launched a few months prior to the COP26, so that the leaders, they have some scientific basis upon which they start discussing. So you mentioned that. And then you move on to the major developments, because there were multiple major developments which happened at the 26th COP. So you mentioned that. One was the Glasgow Climate Pact, which came into being. So the Glasgow Climate Pact was adopted and it covers 4 areas: mitigation, adaptation and loss and damage. Along with that, finance is covered as a part of Glasgow Climate Pact and collaboration. So the Glasgow Climate Pact discusses these 4 areas. And then you mention what have been the major outcomes. So the major outcomes, one is the commitments by the countries to go net zero. And now these commitments by different countries to go net zero, they cover about 90% of the world GDP and 90% of the global emissions, which is a huge thing, which is a big development. 90% of the GDP and 90% of the emissions are being covered by net zero commitments. So you write that, and along with that, the countries, the Glasgow Pact also asks the countries to revisit and strengthen their NDCs by the end of 2023, so that the short-term targets by 2030 are also scaled up. Because much of the success of Paris depends upon the short-term targets. What world is able to achieve by 2030? That's near term. That's what we must be able to achieve by the mid-term or the near term. So that's the first point of discussion. The second can be the phase down of the coal power. Now, don't mention what the newspapers were mentioning, some of the editorials, that the language was diluted at the last moment. Instead of the phase out, it was replaced with phase down. Don't go into the controversial part of it. Anyway, you don't have the luxury of words over here. You need not mention that, because the question is not asking you to critically analyze the outcomes. It's simply asking you to describe the outcomes. So just write down the outcomes and then move on to the next question. So the phase down of the coal power, wherein about 190 countries have made commitments to phase down the use of polluting coal energy. Next very important development was with respect to forest and land use, where this declaration on forest and land use was adopted by the leaders, which says, and more than 137 countries participated in it, which says that by 2030, deforestation and land degradation will be halted and it will be reversed. So that's important as well. Then the methane pledge. Methane pledge, which has participation of over 100 countries, that the global methane emissions will be cut down by around 30% by the year 2030. And it's important because the top 6 emitters of methane are part of it. United States, European Union, Brazil, these countries being the top emitters, they are part of it. And then IRIS, very important as an adaptation scheme for the small island states, because the small island states are have been experiencing impacts of climate change like none other. And they have limited capacities to cope up with the impacts. So earlier we had the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, but now we have This IRIS, Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, which will provide technical support on issues related to infrastructure development for the small island states. So, there is a need for resilient infrastructure, climate resilient, disaster resilient infrastructure for the small island states. That is what is going to be the objective of IRIS. And then you have already discussed about the one sun, one world, one grid under the GGI question. That could be just a passing reference like it's given over here, otherwise don't devote too many words to it. Then there were critical developments related to how the climate finance pledge will be met. That climate finance, $100 billion will be given to developing and LDCs, developing countries and LDCs, how those commitments will be kept, because till now there was lack of clarity. Abhi bhi the entire commitment has not been met. And there were developments with respect to finalization of the rule book of Paris Agreement. So, mention these. Then the next part of the question, India's commitments. So, India's commitments were in form of the 5 nectar elements which are called as Panchamrit, which were made by the Prime Minister of our country. That's the most important part of India's commitments. So, mention the 5 of them, I am sure all of you know them. The first one is that renewable energy capacity will be up to 500 gigawatts by the year 2030. The earlier target was 450 gigawatt, which has been now enhanced to 500 gigawatt by the year 2030. And half of the energy requirements will be met by renewable energy by the year 2030. The earlier target was not 50%, it was around 45%. So, that's again increasing, upscaling the target. Then in absolute terms, carbon emissions will be reduced by around 1 billion tons by the year 2030, and the carbon intensity of the economy will be reduced by around 45%. That's another important. Yeah, earlier 33 to 35% tha. Now it has been again scaled up to 45%. And the last one is that India will become net zero by 2070, which is completely in sync with the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. So, India is playing a pivotal role. India is playing a major role for climate action, despite the fact that India has not been one of the major emitters in absolute terms globally. Right? But now, I don't know whether you had the to mention points like CBDR or India not being one of the major emitters, but if you did not have so much of luxury of words, which is completely understandable, just mention in the conclusion that now is the time, after the commitments have been made, now is the time when the countries, they come together, all the stakeholders, they come together. It is not just the governments, please keep in mind, stakeholders is the private sector. Private sector will have to play a very critical role to meet the climate targets. So, all the stakeholders, they come together to execute the action plans as per the Glasgow Climate Pact. So, that could be the closing statement. And now the last question, question 18. This was again from disaster management. Describe the various causes and effects of landslides. Mention the important components of National Landslide Risk Management Strategy. So, National Landslide Risk Management Strategy, this one was unveiled by the NDMA back in 2019. That was one. And apart from that, we know that there have been multiple incidents of landslides in Western Ghats and in Himalayan region as well. States of Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, particularly affected by landslides in this year, in the last year as well, and 2018, 2019 was a spate of landslides for region of Western Ghats, states like Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra, all of them. So, you begin your answer by defining what landslides are. You open up your answer by a quick definition of landslide, which is a kind of mass movement wherein there is sudden downward movement of the rock and the debris under the force of gravity. A quick, crisp definition of landslides could be the opening statement. And then you move on to the major causes. Now, when you are mentioning the causes, Give examples alongside. Examiner hasn't per se asked you examples in this question, but in disaster management, always advisable to substantiate the points with the answers, with the examples. So there are two major causes for landslides. Slope failure, which is the fundamental underlying reason, but slope failure can happen because of tremors, because of earthquakes, which is a major reason for landslides in Himalayan region. And slope failure can happen because of increased hydrostatic pressure in between the crevices of the rocks and the slopes, that is the topography, because of heavy rainfall, sudden heavy rainfall. So that becomes one of the major reasons for landslides in Western Ghats. Though Himalayan region is also not untouched by extreme weather events like cloudburst causing landslides. The 2013 Uttarakhand flood was a case in point. So you mentioned these two examples, these two reasons for landslides, slope failure because of earthquakes or heavy rainfall, right? These are the natural factors. And then mention the human factors. Human factors are becoming the immediate trigger for landslides to happen. That is when the development is relentless, unscientific, beyond the carrying capacity of the fragile ecosystems. So human factors like heavy construction of dams, roads, railways, activities like mining, quarrying of minerals, deforestation, substituting the natural forest with the plantation forest, all of which have been responsible for increased intensity of landslides, that is very, very severe landslides in the Western Ghat region in the year 2018 and 2019. So this comes directly from the studies of 2018-2019 landslides. So you mentioned both the reasons. It's very important that you mention both of them. In recent years, incidences have increased because of extreme weather events increasing. Extreme weather events are increasing because of climate change. And environmental degradation is increasing because of unscientific development happening across the fragile hill ecology of the country. And the effects, one is large scale damage of life, of property, economic losses, and then flooding can happen when lakes are formed and breaching of the lakes happens. So flooding can happen then. Then I told you a little while back that for disaster management, know the statistics related to HRVA, Hazard Risk Vulnerability Assessment, that is which disaster is likely to happen in what percentage of India's area. So like we have for landslides, the GSI tells us, Geological Survey of India tells us that nearly 13%, that's 12.6% of the area of the country is prone to landslide hazards. That's prone to the hazards of landslide. So that's why the NDMA unveiled the landslide risk management strategy back in the year 2019 and the major components of the strategy. Now, I'm not very sure how many of you had gone through the original document of the strategy, the landslide risk strategy document, but the document, what it has done is that it has identified the major gaps which are existing in the entire disaster management cycle of landslides. So if you know the disaster management cycle of landslides, then this strategy unveiled the gaps which are existing. After rigorous study, it could identify the gaps which are existing in those, and it has given recommendations for filling in those gaps. So basically, the document of the National Landslide Risk Management Strategy is covering all the components of disaster management cycle for landslides. And like I tell my students, the disaster management cycle begins with understanding the landslide risk. That's Hazard Risk Vulnerability Assessment. For any disaster, it begins with HRVA. That's the first component. Then is mitigation. Mitigation means disaster risk reduction, which can be done through non-structural measures, which are the techno-legal regime, the technical solutions and the entire regulatory legal framework architecture we require for mitigating the risk. So that's the second component. The third is what are the structural measures which are needed. So that's the third component of the strategy. The fourth is installing early warning systems. And then quick description in all of them, that interagency coordination kahan chahiye, which all agencies will be required, what kind of technological upgradation will be required, but these are the major heads. And the next is preparedness. Once we have the EWS, preparedness is related to awareness generation, preparedness is related to people knowing do's and don'ts, conducting mock drills, etc. and having the resources in place to carry out rescue relief operations, so all that. And then response, once the warnings are received, the response begins, or once the actual event happens, the response begins. So that's another component. And recovery, which is focused upon building back better, which is a long-term process, medium to long-term process. So implementation of all this requires interagency coordination, and in the strategy is in sync with the Sendai framework, which you can mention over here, that it's in sync with, it's in alignment with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, and it calls upon, for disaster management, interagency coordination becomes critical. So it calls upon interagency coordination to implement the gaps which are existing. So this takes care of all the 6 questions of Environment and Disaster Management section of paper 3 of 2021 mains. The major takeaways remain the same. The questions are usually from the current affairs, though like in the past UPSC has asked you questions from the static part, you have to be prepared for everything. You cannot take it for granted that if UPSC has asked a question on one of the topics, it will not repeat it. Very high chances that if the topic is getting repeated in the news, UPSC will repeat it in one or the other form in the examination as well. Next, you cannot think of writing these answers. Some of them are very direct, some of them aren't, like the last question or the earthquake related hazard questions. You cannot think of writing these answers extempore without you practicing any of the answers back in your rooms. So practicing the answers becomes increasingly important, because managing time, managing words is a challenging task. Otherwise, this year the questions were pretty direct, not much of critical analysis needed, but simple points which you had to mention. If you have been reading your newspapers, you can handle these questions.
Now we will be moving on to our third question, that is analyze the multidimensional challenges posed by the external state as well as non-state actors to the internal security of India, and also discuss measures required to be taken to combat these threats. Now, if we talk about this question, it's a very generalized question, and here you can start off with a very general introduction, such as, see, that ever since independence, India has been facing the multiple challenges related to its territorial sovereignty and territorial integrity that has been posed by the external state as well as the non-state actors. Simultaneously, you can say, like, the country has been forced to go through a number of fault lines despite going through a high level of social, economic as well as political development. The country has faced 4 major wars, 4 with Pakistan, 3 with Pakistan and 1 with the China. 3 Pakistani wars and 1 Chinese war we have already faced. Such points are the one which can be mentioned as regards the introduction of such questions is concerned. Now the second part that they are emphasizing on to is external state as well as non-state actors. If we talk about the external state, or you can say external challenges, so these external state or external challenges are majorly posed because of Pakistan on one hand and China on other. Here you can mention, as regards Pakistan is concerned, the increased activity of ISI at Nepal border has been a matter of concern for internal security of India. Now, along with that, the close relationship, or you can say close relation between Taliban and Pakistan, or you can say ISI of Pakistan. Now, fake currency rackets operating from the Pakistani soil, then the cyber warfare is another issue that can also be discussed. This dimension can also be covered. Within the cyber warfare, you can use the propaganda warfare as well as social engineering, especially in case of Jammu and Kashmir. These social engineering attacks are the one which are being launched by Pakistani now. Now, there is an element of China which is also involved as regards the internal security of India is concerned. So, on part of China, you can discuss the construction of roads. On part of China, we can discuss the construction of roads, or in the recent case scenario, we can talk about the use of these spider excavators. Use of the spider excavators by the Chinese PLA near border areas. Along with that, you can say the construction of villages near the tri-junction is another attempt on part of China. Along with that, as regards China's role is concerned, China has played a very important role in fueling the insurgency in the northeast. Specifically when it comes to the case of Mizoram, when it comes to the case of Nagaland, they have played a major role by supplying them weapons, arms, by supplying them monetary or money related help, by training them in infiltration tactics as well as sabotage strategies. So China has played a very important role over here also. Now, along with that, you see, Chinese cyberspace is constantly being used for launching the attacks onto Indian cyberspace. This can also be mentioned, because you see, cyber is the one which has already been recognized as the fifth dimension of war by US. And now, this has caused a very huge financial loss. So you see, this can be the role of China as well as Pakistan that we have already seen. As regards the threat to India's internal security is concerned, simultaneously we can also see what is the role of non-state actors as regards India's internal security is concerned. So if we talk about this role of non-state actors, so in this non-state actors, what you can see is insurgency, especially when it comes to the case of northeastern states, when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir, when it comes to the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Along with that, left wing extremism is a very big threat that has been posed to India since 1967. Along with that, there are organized crime. Along with that, there are organized crime, specifically money laundering, and drug trafficking. Money laundering as well as drug trafficking is there. Simultaneously, there are fake currency rackets. There are fake currency rackets that can also be discussed under that. Fake currency rackets are there. Now, in the non-state actors, you can also discuss communalism. Communalism is something which can also be discussed under the non-state actors part. So you see, there are multiple challenges that are being posed by different non-state actors. You can just write a line or two about each of them. Now, next, if we can talk about various measures which are required for it. Under the measures part, what we can see is, or what we can talk about is devising a new policy on part of the Cabinet Committee on Security as well as National Security Council, and this strategy or policy is something which has to be proactive in nature. Along with that, you see modernization of the security forces. Modernization of security forces is a very important aspect that need to be covered. Now, border management aspect has to be dealt over here. Along with that, police reforms need to be initiated. Police reforms, because you see, when we talk about the issues like left wing extremism, etc., Naxalism, etc., it is the police force which act as a primary force. Along with that, what you can say is the cooperation between the agencies. The interstate cooperation between various agencies is something which need to be promoted. Now, along with that, you see, our coastal borders are something which are also porous. So, this coastal security framework need to be strengthened. Now, we will move on to our last question, and that is analyze the complexity and intensity of the terrorism, its causes, linkages and obnoxious nexus. Also suggest measures required to be taken to eradicate the menace of terrorism. It is supposed to be answered in 250 words and it will be carrying 15 marks. Such questions are direct questions again, and you can directly start off with the definition of terrorism as if what terrorism means. You see, terrorism, you can just write a definition of a line or two, that terrorism basically refers to an act of violence or more an act of committed violence towards civilians, people, or to coerce a particular government in order to meet the political objectives. Now, second is you have to discuss the causes. What are the causes? Now, if we talk about the causes, it could be the extremist tendency, More often it culminates into what we call as hatred towards a particular community. You can give the example of LTTE over here. Along with that, you can say sense of deprivation is specifically among culturally different communities. Specifically among the culturally different communities is also the source of what we call as terrorism. Now, apart from that, there are issues like unemployment, or you can say lack of education. These can also be mentioned. They also play a very dominant role in promoting terrorism. What we can see is spillover effect. Now under this spillover effect, what we can see is, like Pakistan is noticing a number of terror activities simultaneously as a transnational crime. It can be seen in case of India also. In case of India also you can see such activities. Now you can see the poor societal structure and weak government, they will also contribute to what we call as terrorist activities or promotion of terrorism. Now if we can talk about this complexity aspect, so what you will see is that this terrorism is a very complex issue because of use of technology, especially for cyber terrorism, psychological warfare, Now another aspect is terror financing, via cryptocurrency. You see, if we talk about the Paris attack, the cryptocurrency was used to raise the terror funding over there. Such dimensions need to be covered under complexity aspect. Along with that, especially it has an influence that it has exercised over younger generation, Simultaneously, there are a number of NGOs which have involved themselves into terror financing. A number of such NGOs have already banned by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Now, under linkage and obnoxious nexus, what you can see is the drugs and smuggling aspect. Along with the drugs and the smuggling aspect, what you can see is counterfeit currency aspect or dimension is something which can also be covered over here. Now, there is an involvement of radicals and events like brainwashing. Now, along with that, what you can see is, there has been a very active role of NGOs that they have played. You can see, if we talk about linkages, or you can say this obnoxious nexuses. You see, in Northeast, it is majorly kidnapping, it is extortion or the money which is extorted, or the taxes, illegal taxes that have been levied by the non-state actors. They play a very important role. For the terror financing. In Jammu and Kashmir, this counterfeit currencies plays a very important role. If we talk about Punjab, in Punjab, the drug trafficking plays a very important role as regards terror financing is concerned. Smuggling of arms is another issue that can be covered over here as a separate issue. Smuggling of arms, that itself is presenting a very big challenge over there. And illegal taxation system, specifically you can say in the Naxalite operated areas, that itself is a very big challenge as regards, you can say, the linkage and this obnoxious nexus is concerned. Now, if we can talk about the measures. On measures part, you see we have UAPA, which is already existing. It's an already existing legal framework. Now we have acts like Pmla to put curbs onto activities like money laundering. That is something which can be mentioned. Now we at international level we have FATF, Financial Action Task Force, and India is a very active member of FATF. Now UN Convention on transnational crime. Transnational crime is already existing. Now there is interagency coordination. Interagency coordination. And if we talk about this interagency coordination mechanism, NetGrid will serve as the best example. This NetGrid will serve as the best example, which will go through the big data analytics of various databases. Roughly 21 databases are included as a part of NetGrid. Now, along with that, what needs to be done? What needs to be done? First of all, the terrorism need to have a definition. The definition of terrorism is something which is not universally accepted. Terrorism does not enjoy. In fact, our Prime Minister has already said that there is a time, there is a need to define terrorism first, then only we will be able to act on to it. Now simultaneously, there is a need for a stronger international framework. There is a need for stronger international framework to deal with the terrorist activities. Simultaneously, there is inter-agency coordination that need to be promoted. Inter-agency coordination, that is something which need to be promoted. Now, already existing laws are the one which need to be updated. Already existing laws need to be updated. Simultaneously, the government has to follow the developmental approach. Developmental approach via developmental plans. Because you see, in the Kashmir region, the terrorist activities have been reduced to a significantly low number because of the number of developmental scheme that has been implemented by the central government, or you can say with the assistance of the central government. So these are certain ways that can be taken as the measures to tackle the menace of terrorism. So this is all we have for the internal security part. Wish you luck.